That kind of have some nexus with the Oregon Business Plan. And so we are thrilled to have such a great turnout of Southern Oregonians to touch base on the Oregon Business Plan. We're titling this a regional forum. For any of you that have attended the business plans in the recent years, you know that at the state level, we generally speak or start each of the summits with regional breakfasts where we come together and have an opportunity to not only kind of talk about major issues and focuses within our region and share that with some of our friends in the metropolitan area. And so if anything, this is kind of closing that loop on this year's activities by coming back and being able to do a regional focus after our work that we've done. We have our partners here today to help us understand some of the issues that have been galvanized and focused on a statewide basis, and we're hoping to again add some local color to that as to how it all works. I think the interesting thing, and my good friend Jeremy Rogers, who's the project manager for the Oregon Business Plan, he actually works for the Oregon Business Council, is probably going to get a few gray hairs because I'm about to read something. If you Google the Oregon Business Plan, you'll of course find a Wikipedia definition. It's fairly accurate, and maybe we can do some refinements on it, Jeremy, as we go forward. But if you look at what Wikipedia says, is that the Oregon Business Plan was launched in 2002, is a nonprofit organization, working to build a stronger and more competitive economy of Oregon. The business plan is a collaborative effort between Oregon businesses, community, and elected leaders of the government of Oregon. Also fairly accurate, but not totally accurate, since it was basically founded by Senator Ron Wyse, who I believe works in another level of government. But anyway, according to Wikipedia, the reason we have the Oregon Business Plan is to create and sustain a vision for Oregon's economy and what it takes to get there, provide a framework for collaboration among business and elected leaders, and develop a common agenda for Oregon's traded sector industries that help grow our economy. Now, in the last paragraph here, it says, the Oregon Business Plan is located in downtown Portland, Oregon. Not. Duncan Wyse is president. Not. The Oregon Business Plan hosts an annual leadership summit each December, relatively true, in Portland, where many business and elected leaders gather to share ideas and speak their minds. So that is what Wikipedia says we're doing here. And it also says, under its history, that Oregon's industries preside over their own fate. So anyway, Jeremy, make sure whatever you do to be able to massage and to change our Oregon Business Plan, plan definition of Wikipedia we want to do. With that stage set, we would like to begin with, again, an overview of the 2013 Oregon Business Plan. And joining us today are Duncan Wyse, President of the Oregon Business Council, and Clemens, President of Associated Oregon Industry, J.L. Wilson, with good Southern Oregon credentials, working for AOI, and then Jeremy Rogers from the Oregon Business Council and our project manager on the Oregon Business Plan. So without further ado, who's going first?
I'll start. Thank you, Bill. And wow, I did not know we had made the Wikipedia, so that's really cool. Thanks for reading. We'll work on that. It's not bad. It's pretty accurate. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Ron, Fox. Thank you, Southern Oregon, for inviting us. It is a pleasure to be back here. Southern Oregon has a special place in the Oregon Business Plan. As I think many of you know, I see a lot of friends who've been with us for the full 10 years we've been doing this enterprise. The first regional meeting of the Oregon Business Plan was in Medford. The first leg of Senator Wyden's bus tour started in Medford. The first regional breakfast, I think it was Steve Vincent, organized for Medford at the first summit, and that has become, the regional breakfasts are now a statewide affair. We have 9 of them And we present with the Oregon Solutions and Regional Solutions projects, we identify local regional priorities at the summit, which has become a really powerful tool. And so we've just had a wonderful partnership with you all over these years. And of course, Bill Thorndike was our second chair of the Oregon Business Plan, and Ron Fox is now a member of the steering committee. He's doing a great job of coordinating issues down here and making sure we're aware of them as part of the business plan process. So we have done many PowerPoints in front of you over the years, so we're not going to do that today. I'm going to be really brief about the business plan and where we are, and then we'll let my colleagues offer additional perspectives. But just to remind you what the business plan is, first of all, it is an economic strategy for Oregon's economy. It starts with goals. We want to create 25,000 jobs per year. We want to raise our per capita income above the national average. We want to reduce poverty. It has a vision for the economy of strong traded sector firms that compete globally, and it has a strategy for getting there that talks about the conditions in the community that support traded sector firms around people, place, productivity, and pioneering innovation. And as we look at the data and we study how we're doing, we then create a set of initiatives, which we'll be talking about, that we think will make a difference. And we work on those initiatives with our partners in the business community and in the public sphere to try to make a difference in each of those issues. So that's the basic structure. The team that works on this, what's been really exciting and I think unique among the country is the collaboration. This guy and others in the business community at the state level, the associations, we all work together on the business plan. Our chairs serve on the business plan steering committee along with people like Ron Fox and others. So we work together in building a common agenda for Oregon around the economy and the initiatives that will support it. And we have a wonderful set of relationships with elected leaders. And again, without their support, starting at Senator Wyden, who launched it with Senator Smith back in that period. I see Dennis Richardson here. He's been an absolutely spectacular partner. We have a great partnership with legislators, and certainly the governor has been very eager and helpful in supporting the business plan. So we work very closely with the elected leaders on working to make the initiatives happen. One of the great values of the business plan is to help Oregon focus on some critical initiatives that will make a difference to the state. And I think one of the great values of the Leadership Summit, which we had in December, was to, again, help focus the state on what really matters. And you will see on your desks, on the tables, there is the initiative agenda for the year. It's a bit lengthy. But our current chair, John Carter, when he took over, said, we got to get this down. We got to make sure we're messaged. People don't have necessarily a really long attention span these days. So let's put it on a card. So you also have on the table the card. And there are three slogans. On one side of it has 3 items. And the 3 top agendas: fix PERS, invest wisely in education, and build a bridge. And that's if you want to know in a nutshell what the agenda is, we've got it in those words for this year. There's a lot more. There are 15 initiatives in all. But if we do those 3 things, Oregon will be making enormous progress this year. You'll be hearing a lot about those issues as you hear the presenters today. On the back of the card, or on the front, depending on, on the other side, is a bit of the logic behind the current business plan initiatives. Recall, I think 2 years when we were here, we reminded you that the state's income was declining in relation to Washington State. Revenues for the public sector were relatively low, and we were investing more and more in corrections and Medicaid and social service programs at the expense of higher education, community colleges, and education generally, and that was unsustainable. And we need to break out of that if we were going to build a strong economy. So this, in a nutshell, tries to explain the logic of how we get out of the kind of vicious cycle that we've been in the last decade or so. And it really starts with stimulating jobs. We need a jobs agenda. We need to create jobs, and we have a whole set of initiatives that we think will support job creation. We need to invest differently and more wisely in the public sector. A lot of the work that, again, Dennis Richardson, Dave Goddard, and many others in the legislature, Peter Buckley and others have been working on, is to try to turn the way we fund our services so that we can spend them more wisely, get more value out of the services, and then get more value ultimately especially out of education, because we need that education so vitally to provide the workforce we need for the future. And then if we have better and more wise investments in education, then we can start raising our incomes, doing a better job on the economy, and then we get into a virtuous circle where we reduce the costs of Medicaid corrections, raise our incomes, bring in more revenue, and generate more dollars for the public sector and more money for education. And so there is a logic to what we're trying to do in getting out of again, that vicious cycle that we've described. And that's all part of the initiatives we've laid out in the business plan. So we presented these at the summit this year, and again, I think we've got a lot of alignment with a lot of the key policymakers around the initiatives. Really eager to hear your perspectives on them today. And as Jeremy and JL will mention, we really are going to need your help. There is going to be a legislative agenda. We're putting together all the bills associated with these 3 initiatives and more. And we'd love to have local voices, making sure we're connecting the legislation in the way that matters to you, and that we're really having your voice as we pull together that agenda. So really eager to hear what's on your mind today and to connect with you again, and want to make 2013 the 11th year of the Oregon Business Plan as successful as ever. Thank you. And Jay, my colleague, turn it to you.
Thanks, Duncan. It truly is a pleasure to be here. Always enjoy coming down to Bedford. We have, if you're not familiar with Associated Oregon Industries, our registered name is the Oregon Chamber of Commerce. And so that gives you a frame of reference of the kind of organization we are. We've got about 120, 130 employers that are members in the Medford area. And we have board members down here too. So you're well represented in policy development and in advocacy work, AOI. I look forward to listening a lot today and learning, and we'll have an opportunity at the end of the program to have a little exchange on specific issues if you'd like to do that. My assignment is just to talk about how we have unified business community around the business plan and how we will continue to do that as we move forward here, particularly during the next few months when the legislature's in session. So much of what has to happen in that business plan is dependent on what happens in public policy on the legislative front. As Duncan mentioned, it truly is a partnership among a lot of different interests in the development of this business plan. The kinds of things that Duncan talked about, the 3 big issue areas, those are things that we've all worked on for a long time. We've all invested in research. We all have our respective members and groups working in policy development. And the good thing that is the outcome in the business plan is all of our separate organizations, separate interest groups have come together to create this agenda. This is complex stuff, and it is not easy to get us from the beginning to a policy and then get it communicated to policymakers and get it done. One of the things Duncan didn't mention is that in those primary policy areas, education, the bridge, PERS reform, governor's on board too. It's a good thing. I have been all over the country, different states, seen how communities work together, and this business plan has brought both sides of the aisle together, all the parties together, business together in a way that I haven't seen anyplace else. It's a great thing. We want to work with you. JL and I will come down sometime in March and talk about how things are going and have another meeting, and we look forward to doing that. We'll keep you up to date. I'm going to hand the mic over to JL, and he'll talk about a way that we communicate around the state and that you can plug into to keep up on how the business plan is progressing, as well as other issues that we're concerned about relative to job creation in Oregon.
Thanks, Jay. I'm going to talk logistics a little bit. This is kind of where the rubber hits the road for the Oregon Business Plan. We all come out of the December Business Summit. A lot of good ideas, initiatives spawned from those meetings and the work that precedes that meeting in December. And then the question is, what happens from there? What happens to all those good ideas that we invest our time and effort in developing? Let's face it, the legislature is a busy place, and even the best ideas and the best initiatives get lost in that milieu if there's not an organized effort to bring them to the forefront and get legislators' attention and get them passed into law. So to kind of show you how this process goes and how the business plan has developed, one of the things that Jeremy's responsible for that I help him with is every single one of those things, those ideas and initiatives that becomes public at the annual business summit in December has to be translated into a legal proposal, a piece of legislation that actually you can turn into law to make it the law of the land. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to not only develop the verbiage, but we have to get it to legislative council. They draft the laws. We have to get it introduced into the legislature. Now, as I said, every good idea gets lost unless there's somebody behind it to push it every day, and there are 90 legislators. 90 legislators that have to be informed, that have to be brought along in this process, who have to understand the importance of what we're trying to do, the policy agenda that we're trying to achieve for a healthier Oregon economy. What that requires, I'm going to say the L word, lobbyists. I'm a lobbyist, I'm not afraid to admit it. And one of the things that we do, and I want you to know that this work happens behind the scenes, because I don't want you to go home today thinking that, well, what's going to happen next? What happens next is when that legislation is introduced, and it'll probably be introduced as early as next week, there are a group of us, starting with AOI, starting with the Oregon Business Council, that convenes a group of lobbyists, mostly those who represent the trade associations that you all belong to, in an organized effort to shepherd these proposals through the process so that we get them passed by the end of June. I want you to go away today knowing that there is an organized effort in Salem to do that. And it's not just AOI and it's not just OBC, but a number of the trade associations that you belong to are part of that effort. I think immediately of the Restaurant Association, Lodging Association, the Home Builders, Associated General Contractors, the Medford Chamber, the Portland Chamber. There are a lot of groups that will sit down every week and say, okay, where's our legislation? Where is it in the process? Who needs to be talked to? What votes need to be counted? How do we move this from point A to point B? And I want you to understand that that process does go on, and that's something that's sort of in Jeremy's and my job description, is to help shepherd that process. It hasn't always been that way. I think one of the great developments of the Oregon Business Plan is that we have developed that network and that capability to move these through the process that didn't exist 6 or 8 years ago. That's a credit to Duncan and the organizations involved to understand the importance of what we're doing, but to really get behind it. It's taken some time, but it is certainly, we've arrived at that place where there is an organized effort happening. Now, I'm talking about the associations and the lobbyists and our groups that work on it from Salem, but let's face it, it takes a much broader effort than that, because the reality is, if the legislature just thinks that J.L. Wilson or Jeremy Rogers cares about it, who cares? What they really want to know is the people back home care about it. And so I want to talk to you just briefly about our communications vehicle. The business plan not only has its own website and communications vehicle, but many of you may subscribe to the Oregon Prosperity Project. And it's OregonProsperity.org. And what you can do with the Oregon Prosperity Project, it is the communications vehicle, the grassroots communications vehicle for the Oregon Business Plan. We will be talking, and we came out with our message, in fact it just came out yesterday, about our pillars of prosperity. And you will notice the issues on this card will look awfully familiar to you because we incorporated these 3 items plus an agenda item of growing jobs and incomes, and a federal issue pertaining to the national debt. But this is the grassroots communication vehicle that will let you know exactly what's going on with the business plan at any point in time. The reason that's important is because through our communications tool, you will have the ability not only to be informed, but then our communication site allows you to go back and talk to Dennis Richardson or talk to Peter Buckley or Sal Esquivel and let them know that these issues are important to you and let them know you like their support on them. So grassroots communication, grassroots support really is, I would say, the most integral component to this, and that you do have a way to find out what's going on, and you do have a way to subsequently communicate with Dennis and with Peter and with Sal on these types of issues. We give you that capability through the Prosperity Project. So if you haven't already, we're communicating probably with over 200,000 Oregonians on the Prosperity Project. If you're not getting our emails or you haven't seen the website, I would encourage you to do that because, again, it is the way to get grassroots involvement behind the Oregon business plan. And if you don't do it and you don't convey your interest, then let's face it, the plan will stall. So my hope is coming out of today, you understand that there is an organized effort in Salem and that you do have a direct ability to impact how the plan goes, how the plan is addressed in Salem by virtue of your involvement and paying attention. So thank you, I appreciate it, and please check out the OregonProsperity.org.
I'm Jeremy Rogers. I'm the project manager for the business plan, and I think we've pretty much covered the waterfront. I'll add just a few things. First, I'm going to look forward to calling our intern that created the Wikipedia page and let him know how great a job that Bill Thorndike they did. And we'll be happy about that. And then, just a few other things. One, I really want to thank you for having us down here, and particularly wanted to thank Ron and Mary Beth and the folks at Soretti, as well as Jeff Griffin from Regional Solutions, Bill Thorndike. We've had just a great partnership with folks down here who've helped us make the business plan relevant and make the summit a success. And it's exciting to be down here to be able to spend more time listening directly to what's on your mind. And so thanks for having us. And the only other thing I want to add is just to kind of draft off JL. And I believe at the end of the meeting, Ron's going to have some sign-up sheets around with all the different issues associated with the business plan, where you can put your name and contact information down on the issues that you're particularly interested in, and that'll allow you to stay connected to not only the Prosperity Project, but if a very specific opportunity comes up on one of these issues, the folks that are working on it can reach out and work with you on that as well. So hope that you do that, but I think we're mostly just excited now to listen to what's going on down here. So thanks again for having us.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you all for setting the stage for our presentations. As you see from your agenda, we will now actually transition into a number of panels, again focusing on issues and again how they affect us here in Southern Oregon. So, Ron, are we ready to transition? Great. All right.
So, unless there happen to be some questions, maybe from the floor. Colleen hasn't raised her get off the stage sign yet, so.
Well, we do have a few minutes. Does anyone have a question, sir?
I was just curious on your priorities. You mentioned fixed PERS before fixing education, and I'd like to hear a little bit of the logic behind that.
Sure. No, if you go, Jeremy. Yeah.
Can you repeat the question, Duncan, as you go forward?
Yeah, the question was on the card and on the priorities, why is fixed PERS before fixed education? Well, really they're part of the same, they're one and the same when you look at this, particularly this legislative session. If you, the increases in employer payments to PERS basically eat up all the additional revenue that'll be coming into the state from economic growth, meaning we won't be able to invest any more in education. And in fact, in many cases we'll have to continue to cut teachers, reduce class sizes, or excuse me, increase class sizes and reduce the length of school years. So, and the governor recognized this in his budget, and he built his budget around, based on PERS reforms that allow him to then invest more into the classroom. And so, really, when we're the best way to get funding to education this session and moving forward, because those rates, those employer rates to pay for PERS are going to stay high for the foreseeable future if we don't make changes. The best way in the near future to get, and in the long run to get money into education is by addressing the cost drivers first. But then the second item around investing wisely in education is recognizing, if we make those cost changes and do everything else we can to bring more dollars into education, make sure that we're making those investments most wisely, and including policy changes that can improve the quality of education and the quality of experience that students are getting. So kind of first is really a fiscal issue to allow for better investments in education, and the second is really getting specifically at what those investments are. And as you can see on this chart here and in the book, a little more detail on what those are, and as JL said, those will be translated to specific bills around education here in the next couple of weeks.
Any other questions?
There's no talk about taxes by virtue of being located in the state of Oregon, a pass-through entity that exports things in other parts of the country has a marginal tax rate of 51.2%. because of the high state tax. And there's, that basically means it's a high cost to be here relative to being in a state like Nevada or something like that.
Well, it's not like we don't think about taxes a lot, because I don't think there's any question that our taxes are not competitive. And to address your particular comment, which is a sentiment that's shared throughout the state, there is an effort going on right now between the governor has spearheaded it, and he's brought together groups like AOI and those on the labor side to see if there's some way to get Oregon's tax system to be more competitive and more pro-growth, to address exactly the issues that you're talking about. Now, when you talk about your high marginal tax rates for an S-corp or pass-through entity, the question is, well, how do you substitute that revenue if you're paying a marginal rate of 50%? Then you get into the dreaded sales tax word. I want to be very clear about that. I can't sugarcoat that. And then that becomes the discussion. I guess the question is, and the question that the business community is going to have to answer is that a preferable, more competitive way of taxing the business community than what currently exists? Because I can tell you there's a lot of headwinds if you're going to do anything that's going to reduce the income to the state. Now, the point of view from the business community is if you get a more competitive tax system, and that means lower income taxes, and that means lower investment taxes, you're going to get the economic growth in this state that's going to make revenues explode. But that logic, there's a limited audience for that line of argument in Salem right now. So I just want to be very clear with you what the parameters are. We agree with you, but just understand there's a complexity to that debate, and although we take your position and that's what we bring to Salem, there is another side to that, and we're going to have to find that middle ground.
Great. Well, let's thank our panel that we just listened to start off this morning.
As you can see from your program, this is the transportation panel. And the panelists with me today are Bob Ragon, Douglas County Timber Operators, Kim Stearns, Public Information Officer, Jackson County Airport, and on the air freight side of the airport issues is Wayne Maiers from J&T Cycles. I want to set the sideboards here just a little bit. We've been asked to talk about transportation needs and priorities in Southern Oregon. One element. Another element is how we go about addressing those needs, particularly in terms of garnering more investments to meet our transportation needs in Southern Oregon. Third element is in relation to the rest of the state, because we're not here on an island, and we have to think about not only our needs, but the needs that we have that are addressed in the rest of the state as well. And finally, the other sideboard we have is that we're not to be talking about the highway needs, but the other transportation modes. So this is not a discussion about ODOT, but with my interest in ODOT, I'm on the ODOT Commission. I have to say that as we talk about garnering additional investments in Southern Oregon, we have to realize in terms of highway investments, the funds are very limited. We're getting to the point where after we've built the current projects down here, after we finish Fern Valley Interchange and Highway 62, we have to assume that we're not going to be having very many new investments at all. We have just enough money, not even enough really, to maintain the highway system we have. And so we have to be thinking very carefully about priorities and being very strategic about where we do spend our money. And the same is true for these other modes. We don't have funding for rail. We don't have, for the most part, we don't have a lot of funding for airports. So we're all the modes are in the same boat, another mode, of having to think much more carefully than we ever have in the past about setting priorities and being strategic about using the very limited funds that we do have. So with that little introduction, let's just start in order here. Bob, would you like to begin?
Sure. I'm guessing we have about 10 minutes apiece. Is that kind of the way it works? All right, well, give us the high sign on that, will you? Thank you for inviting me. I represent the Douglas Timber Operators. There's no county in our title. We represent the timber industry in Lane, Douglas, and Coos County, which is actually the backbone of the industry in the state of Oregon. We have 140 members. My expertise is like Ken Winke's. I'm a timber guy. I learned all about railroads starting in 2007 when Rail America and Corp shut down the Coos line, and shortly after that they shut down the Siskiyou line. Since then I know about the Surface Transportation Board, alternative petitions for service, feeder line applications, and all kinds of things that exist in the rail transportation business that most people don't know about. So now I'm an expert in that, and I did it all in 5 years. Anyway, what I want to do is explain to you why rail is important to the Bedford Rogue River Basin. A little history on Rail America, Corp, and why the curtailment of service occurred, and then where we are with our grant applications, which we have been highly successful at, and I'm pleased to report. I got this position of being a rail expert appointed to me by Alan Ford. Alan is the Chief Executive Officer and Principal Owner of Roseburg Forest Products, which is the largest producer of forest products on the rail line that ships between here and Eugene. When Corp Rail America shut down the lines, he recognized that there are a whole bunch of interests involved in being negatively impacted by that closure, and he asked me to put together a coalition to basically do the lobbying work, that bad word, to get service restored. At one point in time, I had about 90 people on my email list. I had all the Chamber of Commerce's impacted in the cities on both lines, county commissioners, everybody was supportive. It's quite frankly, it was a fun issue because nobody really liked the railroad, especially after they shut you down. And the governor, Senator Wyden, Merkley, Congressman DeFazio, Walden, it was a common ground for everybody. And so in that regard, it was a fun project. But it was a challenging one. In 2005, 55,000 rail cars were shipped on the line connecting Ashland to Eugene. 55,000 rail cars. That's equivalent to 150,000 truckloads of material between Ashland and Eugene. Connecting the facilities in Medford, Grants Pass, Glendale, Riddle, and Roseburg, and 77% of those cars were of forest products, primarily lumber and plywood. Oregon is the #1 producer of lumber and plywood in the United States. The second state that produces almost as much as we do is the state of Washington. Between the two of us, Oregon and Washington, we ship products all over this country. Our major markets are in California, Arizona, Nevada, Denver, Chicago, and even New England. Because of the mass of the country, truck transportation to provide those products to our markets is not realistic. Basically, the effective distance for trucks is about 500 miles. But when you go beyond that, you really need a different mode of transportation, and obviously rail is the solution, and it has been for years, and it will continue to be. Fuel efficiency is important. Oh shoot, 5 minutes? All right, fuel efficiency is important. We can move a ton of freight 413 miles on 1 gallon of diesel. So it compares very, very favorably to trucks. Basically, what I need to say about Rail America and Corp was it was a takeover that was planned. It was a takeover that started with Southern Pacific Railroad, who owned all the rail at one point in time in this part of the country, getting rid of the short feeder lines because they were capable of running a big business, but not really the small business. They sold off those small lines, and initially our service improved dramatically. And then, of course, it went downhill when Rail America took over. They weren't railroad people. They were an investment company, and they acquired short lines all over the country. And basically, their model was to present a large asset base that would be favorable for some hedge fund to buy, which happened in 2007. The name of the hedge fund was Fortress. They bought the line. They issued instructions to shut down every short line that was not profitable. And of course, Coos Bay was one of those, and another one was Siskiyou Summit. And to sell the assets. That was the second part of the business model, sell the assets. And that's exactly what Rail America had planned to do with the Port of Coos Bay, stepping in and basically forced the purchase of that line away from Rail America. Let's see, I'm not getting too well on all that history. You don't need to know more about that. Basically, after a long legal battle, millions of dollars were spent legal fees, forcing Rail America to turn on the Coos Bay line and for us to take over the Siskiyou line. After a long struggle, Rail America recognized that they weren't making progress with us, so they put a new manager in place in Roseburg, one who was interested in running the business. And as a result, we got together in the fall of 2011, put together a strategy to go after 2 grant applications. One, to fix 4 tunnels in the Glendale area to allow the passage of high-capacity cars. New cars being built today are taller than the old ones, and the tunnels that were built on this segment of the railroad in 1880 weren't designed for those cars. And so we have to notch those tunnels, make them about 2 feet higher, and then we'll be able to handle bigger cars, bigger payloads, lower transportation costs to everybody in the road basin who uses the rail line. The other thing we decided to do was file an application. That grant was for $5.7 million. Corp filed the application. I believe it was #2, rated by ODOT and the Oregon Transportation Committee, and we were awarded that grant last summer. The other grant we applied for is a Tiger grant, which is a federal grant. Federal program, $800 million, a large part of money available to every state in the union, heavy competition. We hired a legal firm out of Washington, D.C., filed the application for about $10 million, and we're awarded that grant. So we got 2 grants awarded to us last year. The projects, fixing the tunnels, refurbishing the Siskiyou line. The Siskiyou line includes major work on one of the tunnels up there that had a fire in it years ago to close the line down. It wasn't properly refurbished at that point in time, so more work needs to be done. But we also need to do steel and ties on that line also. Both of those projects will start this spring. They will be managed by ODOT. Arthur Anderson, who has an office in the Medford area, I know he's here today. I have a minute to finish this up. Has been instrumental in helping us. The governor was very helpful, obviously. Senator Wyden's, Congressman DeFazio, who both have connections to transportation issues in Congress. We have both those grants in place. We'll start the tunnels this spring. We'll start the Siskiyou Summit this spring, and we hope to have the tunnel finished this fall, and the Siskiyou Summit reopened by the end of 2014. And it's been a really interesting ride. I know a lot about railroads, and if you want to know more about it, you can ask me later. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. We haven't just in recent years made some real progress on opening up the line again here, but we have a long way to go to make a really effective service. On the issue of air passenger transportation in Southern Oregon, its needs and strategies that we might adopt for pursuing those needs, why don't you go ahead, Kim, and give us your 10 minutes.
It won't be 10. I'm Kim Stearns. I'm with the Jackson County Airport Authority. I've been with Jackson County Airport for just about 16 years. Within that time frame, we have extended our runway from 6,700 feet to 8,800 feet to accommodate larger aircraft. We're looking at completing what we believe to be our second best year for passenger travel from 2012. We're still getting those numbers in, but we're estimating that at around 644,000 total passengers for 2012. So we're very pleased with that. In terms of the airport, we do have a rich aviation history here. The airport is owned by Jackson County, but it does lie within the city limits of Medford. It, like railroads, is important, I believe, to drawing businesses and economy, because as railroads, wherever a railroad was planted in the 1800s, that's where your populations grew. So Southern Oregon, for us, our airport, I think, is a jewel in the crown. As part of the 16 years that I've been there too, we've completed a brand new facility, terminal facility, a brand new air traffic control tower. So basically, we run off of not local county tax dollars, but we get our funds from revenues. And those revenues come from hangar rentals, property leasing, landing fees, fuel flowage fees. So it's not based on local tax dollars. We also look to the federal government, which we all know has been a little shaky. FAA just went through 13 seasons of appropriations, never having money truly allocated, just on short term. This last year, it finally got a 3-year appropriations bill. So it's given us a little more stability in that respect to plan and to move forward. So what we're doing as an airport with that is we are overlaying or rehabilitating the runway that we put in, I believe it was 2001. We're taking our crosswind runway and we're turning that into a taxiway. It won't be a crosswind runway any longer. We're working on our master plan, getting that updated. Airports do, that's kind of our footprint, is our 20-year master plan. And we're looking to wrap up the renewal of that master plan this year. As far as operating, we can't always depend on passenger facility charges and that kind of thing, so we try to diversify. We do have property that we lease. We have Frito-Lay is a company that it's not directly affiliated with the runway, but it is airport-owned property that we lease. We have KC-97. I know that sounds kind of small potatoes, but it's a conference space, so we lease conference space. We look to our passenger facility charges as part of our revenue base, so passenger growth is important to us. We do attend small airport conferences to try to stay competitive with airports in the surrounding area and look at new air service that is going to meet the demographic need in our region. We recently lowered landing fees to stay competitive with the airports that would potentially be our competitors like Eugene or Portland, and that's been beneficial to us. It helps us maintain the air service that we have and allows us to compete for future air service. So, I think that's it.
Okay. Wayne's with a company that uses that airport a lot. And maybe, Wayne, you should start by telling us a little bit about your company. Wayne is head of distribution, and obviously that means getting stuff out to the airport and to the rest of the world. But tell us a little more about the company, but also about what you see as being needed to make it work better for you.
Well, good morning. My name is Wayne Maiers. I'm with J&P Cycles, and most recently we have merged with Motorcycle Superstore out of Medford. I'm residing out of Iowa, originally from there. And in my position, we formed another company really called Mag Retail, where we're going to look at both companies now and trying to garner their best practices and combine those two companies who primarily deal in the same type of business. J&P is an aftermarket motorcycle parts company, the largest distributor in the United States. Is that better? And Motorcycle Superstore, although they deal in parts, they're primarily with the gear that goes with that. So the two are really a good match for each other to be in business together. That's part of my reason to being here. I'm on a trip out here as well, as we're bringing roughly 10 to 12 more jobs out to this area from Anamosa, Iowa, because the importance of the customer service portion of our business is really what's driving us today. Amazon is setting that standard for all of us to follow, and they're getting their goods to their customers right now 2 days minimum, 1 day, and I really think Amazon is going to push to get things delivered same day for their customers. You know, in my generation, you know, the baby boomers, it was okay for us to get packages in 3 to 5 days. We anticipated getting that, and that was a good experience for us. The new generation goes online. They want to get that product as soon as they see it online, and the next day when they're happy and it's at their door, our studies have shown they're more apt to reorder because of that good experience. And that's where the air freight comes into you know, the service for this area. We utilize it quite a bit, obviously, for our business because of our web. Our business has changed in the last 4 years from about 30% of our business being on the web to just last month it was 58% on the web. So we understand where it's going and what those needs are. It also helps with the air freight companies, especially smaller companies, to not have such a burden on their own inventory, which helps us as well. If our customers want it just in time, as a distributor, we want it just in time too. It frees up cash for us to do other things with that. So I can't speak professionally on what the needs are here, but I do know where the industry is going, and would certainly encourage all of you to take a look at what those needs are at the airport in getting those businesses here. You know, Amazon has moved to where they think they can get across the United States in 1 day or less, and UPS is kind of following them around. We currently use UPS for ground service and air, but we also use OnTrack in this area as a ground service. They're getting us to our customer in 1 day as well. So those are things that we're looking at, and I guess when you look at the amount of business that we do in packages, it may seem almost crazy, but an average day for the two companies combined is shipping over 10,000 packages out of their buildings. During peak season, we're going to jump up to around 18,000 packages per day. that are heading either onto a UPS truck or onto a plane to get to one of our customers. And we really want to move towards, right now, getting to a 2-day service. And in the meantime, part of our competition, Amazon, is already getting to 1 day. So you can understand the importance as we move ahead to keep pushing for that air freight in this area as well. Thank you.
By my reckoning, and Colleen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think we have 10 more minutes.
That's correct. Yes, time for questions.
Okay, what I would like to do, if you'll allow me, Ron, is to pose a question to the panelists and then pose the same question to all of you, and you can sort of incorporate that into the questions you have of us. But to me, an essential question is what one thing, if you could do one thing, what is that one thing that should be done to make the transportation system work better for the economy of this region? But make it one thing that should be done that could be done. Don't tell me we want to have great rail passenger service. I'm talking about something that could be done. So could each of you just take 15 seconds and give me an answer to that question?
Sure, I'll start off. I think the one dream that I would have from a distribution standpoint is trying to leverage the companies in one specific area. Because part of that process with negotiating rates through UPS or OnTrack or whoever that company is singular. And I think it would be a new frontier to combine those efforts because it's all based on volume that you're generating to try to reduce those rates. But if you looked at the total packages going out as a community on air service and try to pull UPS into those conversations, I think that there'd be some benefits across the board for all of the businesses instead of each one individually trying to create that standard for themselves.
Okay. Bob?
Well, first of all, I forgot to mention one thing. Let me just add one thing. One other significant thing happened in the railroad business, and that is on December 28th, our short line was purchased by a larger short line called Genesee, Wyoming. Genesee, Wyoming is a major shipper of all kinds of things across the country, but they're railroad people who ran our section of railroad for the last 15 years. Have been investment people, had a totally different view of what they should be providing as far as service goes. So that's the other good news that I forgot to share with you. I'm going to switch hats on you and turn into a timber person. Part of the reason we're having the difficulties we're having in short lines all over the Pacific Northwest is because of the shrinkage of our industry. Coos Bay, for example, at one point in time had the International Paper Mill, a large sawmill in Gardner, big Weyerhaeuser mill in Coos Bay. Half of the shipments that used to go out of the Coos Bay region years ago are gone. The same is true in the Medford Basin. I did a recent study on what the industry looks like today versus what it looked like 15 years ago. You've lost half of your industry down here in this basin.
You're running out of your 15 seconds. Hurry up.
And the answer is going to come up with Ken Winke and Jeff Griffin in their panel.
All right. Kim?
One thing that we won't do is we won't be getting Southwest Airlines in here. So that's a question we get quite often, and it's based on population and demand. As an airport, I would say I think a lot of the frustration for our passengers are the prop aircraft that we still have operating out of the airport. They would like to see more jet aircraft come in. That it would be an airline call that utilizes that fleet of equipment. And the downside of that, when we get the larger aircraft, and we lose our scheduling. So there's trade-offs. Overall, I think at the airport we're healthy. We're moving into solar energy with some canopies out at the airport that were installed last year. And I think reducing our landing fees was the goal that we set. And I think that we're going to see the results of that. That's going to be positive for us.
Okay, now turning to the audience. Either respond to my question about what one thing should and could be done, or pose your own question.
Bob, What kind of condition is the rail and the ties and all of the structure of the rail between here, or for instance, Roseburg and Wairika? Can you give us some idea of what condition it's in?
Yeah, actually, the worst part of the rail condition is between Ashland and Wairika and Wyse. And that's where ties, steel, it's all outmoded stuff that they still have on the ground. That all has to be replaced. The rest of the line, the operator has been maintaining it, and I have all confidence in the world that Genesee, Wyoming is going to do a better job maintaining this line than we've had in a long time.
Other comments, questions?
Some time ago, Horizon Airlines had mentioned about moving part of their base of operations down here. Has that happened yet? And if so, what does that mean to the economy here?
They did do that. They have domiciled some of their crew down here, so it's added 104 people living and working out of this region. They've also put maintenance base here in Medford. So they have 15 to 18 individuals that rotate in and out of that facility, but while they're here, they're spending anywhere from a week to 2 weeks working on aircraft. So we have seen growth in that respect.
Back to Commissioner Lohman.
This is a question. Insofar as all of these modes compete for similar funds, and we already know the answer to this. The good news for our region is that the department has developed really a comprehensive strategy for leveraging those interests for those scarce funds. The question that I would have is, will that become more robust to where they'll look for these public-private partnerships along with all of the freight modes to try and extend the utility of those scarce funds?
I guess that question is about ODOT's thinking and strategy, and the answer is yes. Okay. Mark.
Regular demand for more flights into the area, more cost-effective, regular scheduled flights into the area. And I'm just curious if there's been any kind of studies that assess the actual need and the demand, and if there's anything in the works to make that happen.
That is something, like I said, when we attend the Small Airports Conference that we look at. When Byrne goes down to those, he takes the opportunity to meet with 4 to 5 air carriers to discuss the potential of bringing that service here. In respect to growing that base in San Francisco, the primary carrier for that area is United Express. And we're capable of doing it at our end. I don't know that the demand is there yet. That's going to fill that.
I'm Jim Fong. I'm the director for the Job Capital and Road Workforce Partnership. We serve the Jackson, Josephine County area, so we're here focusing on that spreadsheet or table that your business plan folks handed out. We're one column in the multi-pronged column of the different initiatives or priorities to grow Oregon's economy. Our focus is on education, reform, and workforce readiness. So you see on your agenda the list of the panel members we have here today. What we're wanting them to do is talk a little bit about what's happening with Oregon's education reform efforts, and also what is happening with the workforce readiness, the workforce system reform. Can I do the slide? So I'm going to start with you, Scott, and ask some questions. Can you, and then we'll go to Todd and Kirk as well. Tell us who you are briefly, and then tell us about what's going on with education reform.
Okay, my name's Scott Perry. I'm the superintendent of Southern Oregon Education Service District. We serve all the schools in Josephine, Jackson, and Clemens County in a variety of ways. In terms of Oregon's school reform effort, if we can look at that first slide there, there's a recognition of a need for school reform, and Governor Kitzhaber coming in, there's been significant activity, if you will, around this issue. There's recognition our current generation of young adults, ages 25 to 34, less educated than their parents' generation. This is the first time in decades and decades that this has been the case. It's a major concern, and almost a third of our students are failing to graduate with a regular diploma. At the same time, our school districts have experienced, and you've read about it in the papers, I'm sure, several years, a number of years now, of significant financial distress. We've had a lot of school years that have been shortened, class sizes that have increased. At the same time, the standards and the expectations for education have been increasing as there's been a recognition of our need to compete globally. And so a great deal of tension as the expectations increase and the funding diminishes. And as it's been spoken to before, PERS rate increases, healthcare increases, other kinds of things that schools are dealing with. So Governor Kitzhaber came in, if you can look at the next slide, very aggressively looking at what can we do as a state to address the challenges that we have in education. One of the things that he did is looking at the different silos, educational silos. We've got early learning folks, we've got K-12 education, we've got higher education, and the recognition that sometimes those groups are not working together and the arrows of energy are not being aligned. So one thing that the governor did is hire a chief education officer, Dr. Rudy Crew, who has responsibility for the whole, essentially birth through a university system, thinking that can help collapse some of those barriers and get people working effectively together. Governor also set a goal, you may have heard it as 40-40-20. We prefer to talk about it as by the year 2025, 100% of Oregonians would earn a high school diploma, 40% would earn a post-secondary credential, and then 40% would obtain a bachelor's degree or higher. Just to give you an idea of where we currently are, currently adults ages 25 through 55 in Oregon, 29% have a 4-year degree, 27% have a 2-year degree, 33% have a high school diploma, and 10.9% have no diploma at all. So that 100% having at least a high school diploma, and then the 40 and the 40 is a very significant goal that is going to be really a stretch for us to reach. One of the elements that the governor's also required is the completion of achievement compacts. Every school district has to have an achievement compact that they submit every year. The idea of achievement compact is if the 140-40 is the target in 2025, then how far do we need to get on key indicators as a school district next year, the following year, the following year. And school districts would submit this compact, and then eventually funding would be tied to district progress relative to those compacts. Education service districts also are to develop achievement compacts, and there's a lot of discussion about the notion of a regional achievement compact, which I'm excited about, which would tie in things like workforce investment, the job council, other entities in addition to schools, identifying what is our goal as a region and how are we going to reach that goal.
So I guess Kirk and Todd, you're the secondary education director at Medford High School. Todd, Kirk, you're the vice president of educational instruction at RCC. How are you seeing the achievement compacts rolling out as this is coming to fruition?
Right. So part of the achievement compact was to look at some of the goals that the governor put out in terms of getting all of our students not only matriculated through K-12 education system, but also workforce ready. And some of those standards are very clear. Some of them are based in research in our indicators. For example, the rate of attendance for 6th graders is part of that. And there's some data that would suggest that if 6th graders are attending school on a regular basis, that they might go all the way through high school. And so part of that process as public education will take some of those standards and put them into goals and then put them into strategies and plans. How would you accomplish those? keeping in mind that I think for the last 8 years that I've been working as a director capacity in Medford schools, we've always worked to make a cut the next year. And we're probably running with some of the shortest school years in the nation and the shortest school days in the nation. And yet the standards keep increasing, which they should. We want all kids to be successful and be ready for those next steps. But I think the Achievement Compacts, the idea there is that we would actually put forward those plans to really assure that all kids would make it across the finish line. And so part of that, we broke ours for Medford schools down into 3 areas. We have academics for kids, and then we have what we'd be doing for the staff to make sure that they're prepared and are well trained for those next steps for helping students be successful. But then also the third one is community. And what are our community relationships? And we're digging into our numbers, which are sometimes complicated, but we know that if we get a child in first grade that stays with us all the way through their senior year, we have a 90+% matriculation rate. That's regardless of socioeconomic status, ethnicity, special education, any of that. It's about 93%. So if we get them in first grade and they stay with us all the way through, we have a very high success rate. Just the numbers that Scott just shared, it's way better than those. But if there's a break in there, just one time, where a student goes someplace else and comes back to us, that number drops to well below 50%. And so we started to look at this thing, okay, so we're working really hard in our classrooms with less time, less resources. We're doing really well with the kids that we have. But what happens when things are unstable at home? And what do we have control over? And now that we know some of that, which is a scary statistic, what could we do then to partner in helping those families out? So the compacts have sort of raised those kinds of questions for us. It isn't necessarily just what's happening in the classroom, it's what's happening outside the classroom, which is kind of what this dialogue is all about.
Well, just before you go, Kirk, I'm recalling the last couple of Oregon Business Plan sessions, and the conversations that have come up out of that is really, this is a reframing, this is a transformational moment. There's national recognition that Oregon is at the forefront of this education reform effort. I think the person last year said, all eyes are on Oregon, so I'm wondering what's going to happen with us. Because this is setting a bar, the Achievement Compact sets a bar, but it's also saying we can't keep doing business the same way because we don't have the money. Something's got to change. So speak to that, if you could, a little bit. What do you see happening? What's the change going to need to start looking like? How do you do this and still keep your budget and maintain any kind of capacity?
Sure, I think the fundamental change for community colleges is we went from an open access game, very proud of and involved in the idea that we're the last great all-comers game. You can come, you can play, you're in the game, you can try what you want to try, you can explore, you can enjoy. Come on in, we'll make it work. And we're really, with the compact and the reform agenda, shifting to a much more focused completion agenda rather than an access agenda. And philosophically, that's very different for us. It's a real change in structure. Because what we're looking at now is not only getting students in the door, how do we keep them there once we get them in the door? And then how do we get them quickly from in developmental ed or reading at the 8th grade level and out into the workforce as successful employees in our community? And so it's a shortening as well.
And part of the legislative change that came from the legislative action was your funding coverage. You're getting funded not for seat time anymore, but for these achievements, these milestones. How does that impact you? Or how is it going to impact? It's going to start this September, right?
Yeah, it is going to start in September. I think the challenge for us is looking for ways to make sure that we keep a balance of responsibility for funding education. In the last 6 or 7 years, our funding has gone from about 60% from the state to about 25% from the state. And yet, like any of the other educational institutions, our expenses are increasing. Our world, that translates into tuition changes. If we are about getting larger numbers and more efficiently into the system, we have to be extremely conscious of that price point. If we start pricing ourselves into a place where students cannot afford to attend, then we simply have a problem in being able to generate the kind of economic engine that we feel like we can be in the Valley.
And just before we get over to the workforce part of it, it seems significant on the cards that Duncan mentioned that are on the tables. The 3 priorities: fix first, invest in quality education. Those are the big first 2. This is the side that's about investing in quality education. So much of this is contingent, is it not, on the fixing PERS is a key part of this. If PERS doesn't get fixed, what's that look like for your all's budgets at our capacity and being able to achieve these outcomes, these long outcomes?
Well, I know in the next biennium, our Chief Financial Officer, Brad Earl, is back there in the back of the room there. He has let us know that it's about $3 million to the Medford School District's budget.
Which translates into
well,
how many
it's
teachers?
probably, well, that's probably like 27, 24 teachers or something like that. I mean, it's a number of staff, so we would, you know, that has a direct impact on our class sizes, right? And we all, you know, our teachers are amazing. We hire really well. We're really good at hiring excellent teachers. They do an amazing job. But the difference of having 25 children in a classroom and 35 is significant. And a lot of our physical spaces aren't designed for 35 kids in a classroom. And so there's only so much you can do with what you've got. And after, there's a point of no return there, right? Diminishing returns in terms of business trips. So we have that going on. The last bullet on the card is about building the bridges too. And I would say part of that compact is that all of our high school kids would graduate with a number of college credits in the bag already. So part of that is partnering with the community college, with Southern Oregon University, to find ways that our kids can walk out of high school with some of those college credits already under their belt. The disconnect probably is that right now it's sort of like, well, if a student takes an AP class, an advanced placement class, and takes the test and gets a college credit, it doesn't necessarily translate to what degree they want to get to either. So part of that next step for us is kind of coordinating those bits and pieces that a class that a kid's taking in high school would then translate to maybe an actual degree later on down the road. But that's part of that bridge building too.
I like the double entendre because on the bridge they're talking about there on the card is actually the I-5 bridge over the Columbia River. This is a bridge between your matters us as well.
It's all about metaphors.
Nikki, I'm going to turn to you. Let's talk a little bit about the workforce together quickly. Could you give us a brief update? You're the chair of the workforce board. You're the owner and president of your own company, Express Personnel. You staff and have a lot of employees that you staff at local companies. What's happening with the workforce performance?
Well, there's a lot happening. And the good news for us locally is that when the Oregon Workforce Board helped to create the framework for their statewide plan, our local strategic plan was pretty well aligned with what their goals were. So we didn't have to recreate everything that we had already made some strides in. So that was good news for us. And just for those of you that don't know what the local workforce board is, it's a group of people that we bring together that is it includes private sector employers, economic development, education, and public sector providers. And our role and our goal is to work with education and with economic development to really identify what our workforce needs so we can best serve the employers in our community. And with the statewide plan, we had to drill down to some key areas, one of which is our sector strategies. You know, just as the state had to identify some 3 key areas that they can concentrate on, we can't work in every sector of our local area at the same time. So we had to identify those that are high demand, high skilled, high wage positions. And so currently those sectors that we're working in are healthcare, advanced manufacturing, and e-commerce and information technology. And you know, the e-commerce sector certainly has been very large in our community for a long time. And you know, as Wayne from J&P Cycles was sharing, you know, some of that consortium work, maybe you'll be able to work out some of your transportation days and bring all those people together. But part of the role for our board is to be the conduit of communication between the education system and business, and be able to bring those people together so our educators know what it is that business needs. And that is not an easy task to be able to bring that group together on a regular basis to identify, especially those skills gaps when we're talking about. And what's interesting is that skills gaps for a lot of people, they seem to think that people, with technology and how quickly it's changing and what that means is that it's outpacing the skills of our workers. And when we have jobs that are eliminated and the technology piece in those jobs was really low, there were more manual labor type positions, and then those jobs are replaced by positions that are of a greater technological arena, they really do lack the skills. So we're not just talking about our emerging workforce that's coming out of school and what kind of skills they need. We're talking about our transitioning workforce who has to make a change in their careers. And there's a lot of skills gaps in those areas as well.
And we've heard regularly from employers the skills gap range from everything from technology-based occupation skills to the basic work ethics, pass a drug screening, basic reading, writing, and math. That's where the National Career Readiness Certificate piece fits in?
Correct, yeah. One of the things that the state said is that we want to be able to create work-ready communities, and one of the things that they define with that work-ready community is to get that National Career Readiness Certificate out there, get people certified, have them take that test. Just before we convened today, I asked for some numbers from our local job council and what we were doing with the readiness certificate. And from our fiscal year runs from July 1st through June 30th, so we have about 347 people have taken that test. And then it breaks down, they can achieve anywhere from a bronze, silver, gold, or platinum level on that test. And currently we have no platinum level certificate recipients. About 53% of them are silver, 36% gold. Really, what does that mean? The state, and correct me if I'm wrong in terms of the education piece, they've evaluated that gold level as a high school education in math. So, but the hard part about the translation of that certificate is that if somebody achieves 2/3 of the test could be at a platinum level, and if they receive 1/3 of the test at a bronze level, they'll receive a bronze level certificate. So I think that there's some imperfections in terms of the data and what's happening with that, and we're certainly working on that to be able to, we have to identify what our community looks like in terms of the skills that they do have now to identify what those gaps are.
So it's an effort to try and document where are people and their skills, how long it's been since they graduate high school, college. Tell guys, so you're nodding your head about the skills gap. Speak to us, tell us who you are and what you're needing and seeing in terms of your workforce needs. You're here, I listen to you as a STEM and high-tech employer.
Right.
What you might tell people what STEM is, too?
Science, technology, engineering, math. It's I mean, it's actually in the material that we were given, and I think the president mentioned it in the last couple of State of the Union addresses. I'm the president of Links Technologies. We're a tech company. We basically design electronics, then we build them and sell them. And give you an idea of what we do is, for instance, that wireless mic very well might have a transceiver in it. That's something we design. My background is that I moved here from the East Coast. I ran companies and divisions in Connecticut, New York, and Pennsylvania. And when we came here, we bought Links Technologies, and the idea was to grow it. Our goal is 5 times what its current size is. And we knew full well that one of the key limiting factors is engineers and technical positions, including even people to solder in manufacturing, to grow. And that was we literally listed it in our investment decision as a investment risk, the location of the company in Southern Oregon. And then when we came on board, how do you grow? You hire more engineers, they design more stuff, you sell it. We put out positions for it. It became apparent it's quite difficult to hire very specific engineering talent because it doesn't necessarily exist. There isn't a large enough base. There's other factors too, to give you an idea. We talked about education. Here are those percentages. The goal is 40% that have bachelor's degrees, and the country's currently at 24. Josephine County, if I remember the number correct, is at 14%. So way below all those other things. Over time, we basically realized that what we thought was a negative ended up being a huge opportunity that we could exploit, and it was specifically this. Within that group of people, there is a tremendous amount of untapped potential among people who haven't gotten the experience or necessarily been able to go down that educational track to get the experience of these different things. And in the end, the key things are you smart, are you motivated, and are you passionate about what you're doing? We changed our entire HR strategy to exploit, in essence, because we're business people, you exploit something, you make money, this weakness by not trying to hire experienced people, to try to hire extremely talented people who we would then train and take advantage of. Another benefit of our region is RCC. We literally send people there and we take people from there as much as we can because of that. But this is all because of a weakness in our structure and in the system. Every time I post a job of a senior position, we have a division in Colorado. I always posted the senior positions in Colorado and here. So there are times where there's a senior engineering position that's being taken in Colorado, or a senior financial position, that would have gotten here if we had the wide enough talent pool or experience base.
So you have a very vested interest, literally, in this pipeline flowing well to you, the engineers as well as the talent.
Absolutely.
So let's open it up to everybody because we have a short amount of time. The exercise here, this is tough stuff. We're talking about a lot of institutional systems connecting up to a business strategy. What do people see in terms of how we link this up? How do we get TOGA, the skilled engineers, as other welders and solders? Some of it's happening already through RCC, but you're looking for more. We went over to OIT together. We talked about how do we connect with SOU's computer science department. You're part of the Roman Nexus of Commerce.
Hey Jim, your microphone's out.
Can you hear me? It's out?
Turn it off. Be at the button.
Sorry? I think the battery's off.
It's not the computer.
Go ahead.
Let me share you an anecdote. Maybe sometimes it gives more evidence of how important these technical talent is to us. We hired probably the best engineer out of OIT's program, and happened to be from Josephine County last year. And when we went to their career fair, we came across a kid who was valedictorian of Hidden Valley, I believe it was, at 4.0, through the roof, and passionate about exactly what we do. He's a freshman. I interviewed him 2 weeks ago. We gave him an offer, and it's basically like college football coaches recruiting the best athlete, because that kid is going to develop something that's going to create like 10 or 15 jobs. Just that incredible talent. If we don't get him, he's going to end up in Portland or San Francisco.
And it's also about the rest of the farm leagues and the youth soccer teams, all the way down to that education elementary level. And what I see happening is with this challenge with the funding and the limitations of that, this is the whole, when you look at that Oregon Business Plan website, which I really enjoy, I was telling Duncan and Jay, I think there's some really good stuff on that. The word it uses is about education system transformation. We talk about workforce system transformation. That means something's got to change in how we do business, how we're structured, how we're funded, how we operationalize. Scott, you and I have been participating. Todd's been in that. Debbie McClellan from RCC has been involved in a youth success initiative. Toga and Nikki haven't even heard much about that. We're just going to talk about it at Monday's workforce board meeting. How do you see this connection happening where we can get kids who are at risk, dropping out, et cetera, to become the future engineers for Toga? There's a huge gap between what's really happening on the ground at the school level and what's happening at this level for Toga.
One of the changes in how we do business that has to happen is that we have to all become aligned with each other, reduce duplication, and be as efficient as we can as a larger community system. And that's one of the things that excites me about the Youth Success Initiative. And it's something we haven't really spoken about, but we have education, the Commission on Children and Families, the Job Council, and a number of other parties that have now been meeting together for about 9 months. Initially, a lot of our discussion had to do with understanding each other's terminology, understanding each other's goals and objectives. The idea is that eventually we're going to come up with some kind of a regional student achievement compact that ties smoothly into the workforce. We need to all work together and understand each other. So we've been meeting and having these discussions, coming to agreement, drawing lots of charts on the wall, getting philosophical agreement.
Put some of those charts up there. So we're really talking about creating a 0 through 20 pipeline. Prenatal, early childhood, we have early childhood partners here at the table. The learning starts there.
So we've essentially developed what we call a cradle to career buck stops here group. It oversees really 3 groups. One is early learning, birth through age 5 to 6, and then a K-12 group, and then a group that looks at school to work, school to higher education transitions. And those 3 groups are meeting, and then this oversight group is hearing the communication from them so that we can all get our systems aligned. And we're now at the stage, we've started to talk about this phrase, talk cooks no rice. We can't just talk about it. We've got to start with some very strategic actions.
So let's talk a little bit about that first bucket of the dual credit. There's a goal, Kurt, I know you and Debbie have been working on with Scott. through all the school districts as well. Just speak real quickly about what that dual enrollment piece is, what we're trying to move the needle on there.
First piece of rice that we're putting.
That's the first piece of rice. Small piece. First piece of rice that we're looking at is you lose students in transitions. You don't lose students. You don't tend to lose them when they're with you. You lose them when they go from you to somebody else. So taking out the transition is important, that seamless look. We're doing that really two ways. Students in high school can take classes in the high school by high school teachers that count into college. That's college now or 2+2. The other way we do it is simply the reverse. We put a college course with a college instructor in the high school. So students are getting a flavor of a college curriculum, the college expectations, and the content then. What that does is eliminate a transition. It takes out a seam or a bump in the road. So a student already has 9 or 10 or 12 credits. When they leave high school, suddenly the continuation is a continuation. It's not a stop and a start.
And hopefully more of those would go into traded sector, manufacturing, or e-commerce jobs that, like electronics at RCC over to all IT or computer science, right into all those kinds of positions.
Right, and then we need to look at the flip side, which is then how do we have students transition from our world of education into the world of employment without that same stop-out point? Because it's not a pipeline where you get on I-5 and go from Medford to Portland. You may go to Bend and still get to Portland. You may go to Coos Bay. You may go to Medford. Oh, now I know where I'm going. Now I'm going to Portland. And we have to allow a system that works where students can come in and come back out without losing traction, because that is what they do.
So I'm going to wrap this up. I think we just have a couple minutes left. One of the messages we talked about, I know I've talked with a number of you about this, that we wanted to give this group, particularly to the folks from Oregon Business Plan who come down for this, as well as I think Representative Richardson, I think Representative Buckley is due here soon. He told me to try and get here. They're coming down from Salem, and to our other legislative leaders and community leaders, is that we are working on this. We are working the problem. We are taking on this transformational effort, both from the education side as well as the workforce alignment, workforce readiness side. And it's hard work, but there's a lot. We're moving forward. We actually, Scott, you participate in some of these statewide groups with Rudy Cruz and others. Tell us a little bit your sense of where we're at and what our opportunity is here.
Well, I really hear again and again the focus on, and I've said it before, a regional student achievement compact where higher education, early learning, K-12, and the workforce are all working together in alignment. And as I look at what we're doing, especially with the Youth Success Initiative, it seems to me we're right on the cutting edge of that, and we're well positioned to embrace the kinds of things that are coming down the pipe.
Any final comments before we close it off? Once, going twice. I think we'll catch up questions later because we're getting yanked off the stage, right? Okay.
So we're gonna go to forestry, talk about all the trees that are surrounding us here, and what kind of a question for the panel. You know, with we had about, I guess, 750,000 housing starts in the U.S. last year, and the projection is that will increase a bit, maybe 1 million housing starts. How do we be competitive in that? How do we supply our local mills with the timber that they need off of our public lands? Kind of what's the background on that? What are we doing that's successful? What do we need to do? And we've got a great panel, a lot of experience here, and we've got Ken Winke from Wyse, he's procurement manager, purchases timber sales to supply the veneer mills in the area. He's been in that business for quite a while. Ed Riley is a former planner with the BLM and the Forest Service. He's a lot of experience on the government side in terms of how you lay these things out and what the obstacles are and how you get through the stuff. He's a current member of the Southern Oregon Forest Restoration Collaborative. And Dave Schott here on the end with the Southern Oregon Timber Industries Association. A lot of experience with the timber industry, and he's going to speak about that. And then Commissioner Simon Hare, our seasoned veteran over in Josephine County. He's been 2 years.
Been there for 25 years.
Well, it feels like it. And Simon has been serving on the governor's O&C task force to try to develop some recommendations that can be supported fairly broadly, and it's a big task, and maybe Simon can report on that a little bit. At the same time, Simon tries to run a county that with or without timber receipts, and I know there's some huge challenges there. So let's get started. We're going to start with Ken, and Ken, you give some slides for us. Okay, we'll get started, Ken. Thanks.
Yeah, great. I appreciate being asked to speak here. I spoke at the Oregon Business Plan meeting in Portland, and what they wanted me to do, and what I did, is primarily present the opportunities that we have in, of course, wood products industry to help promote jobs in Oregon, and also what opportunities our forests actually present to us in that. Just to start with, I've worked for Boise Cascade here in Medford about 30 years in the education part of the equation here. I've got a degree from Oregon State University in forest engineering. So, a lot of the people I work with are actually trained professionals in the wood products, forest products management industry. What we do, I guess, is we've got a mill in Wyse City. It's a veneer mill, and they build veneer for the Medford plywood plant that we have not far from here down Old Highway 99. And we have another plant in Rogue Valley that does plywood, and it's idle currently, but we're currently hiring employees to run that mill, and that will produce more plywood and serve our White City engineered wood products mill. And then we've also got a mill in Willamina up in Northwest Oregon, and we purchase logs to run that veneer mill. So primarily we just peel the logs that we purchase either from private sources of timber and timber sales, or from the federal government and other county and state sources of timber sales. Manufacturing facilities are here, as I told you, but we're primarily focused on producing the highest, best product that we can, most value-oriented product out of the trees that we harvest and manufacture. Primary product that we need is Douglas fir that has a high-strength veneer that comes from the tight grain Douglas fir that's in Southern Oregon. These are the products that we're primarily focused on. It's an I-beam primarily. The two flanges on that I-beam are produced from high-strength Douglas fir that's peeled from the primarily local sources of timber, as well as the Versalam beam there, and we're capable of laying up veneer in lengths of 66 feet long by 4 by 4, and we produce that product out of trees that are range from anywhere from 5 inches up to a maximum at our White City veneer mill of about 46 inches or so, but our primary focus is on from 6 to about 24-inch diameter logs, making those types of products to try and make the most strength product out of those trees. Southern Oregon, as I said, focuses on the Douglas fir here. The problem that we've had is this drop in federal forest harvest over the last 2 or 3 decades, primarily as a result of the spotted owl and other species management issues that the Forest Service and BLM faces. You can see that the harvest there has dropped, and the large drop was in about early 1990 or so on that federal forest land line there. That's kind of kind of an orange line. Drop clear down. The green line that's shown there is the private forest land harvest over those decades has remained fairly stable. And I would say in a sustainable harvest level. They might harvest 90% of their growth each year. This is the open mills that were in existence in 1980 when the first spotted owl issues started to arise and the court issues started to arise. Here's open mills in 2010, and the black shows the closed mills over that time period. Actually down in southwest Oregon, one of those yellow dots is gone now because we tore out recently our sawmill over in White City. We used to saw large pine and other pine logs, and we no longer have that mill. That's been torn out. Others are, I'm sure, going to turn black over the next decade. Employment over that period of time has gone from, just direct mill employment has gone from 45,000 down to about 15,000 in 2010, which is a substantial percentage drop in employment that people working directly for those mills. What this doesn't show are the employment drop as a result of the forest, basically the forest management people that we have, who are the loggers, the slash crews, the truckers, everyone associated with actual work in the woods that as a result of that, and the numbers are substantially higher as a result in terms of the job losses. This is the drop in the BLM sale program here for Oregon, and that large decline is back in the late 80s, early 90s. As you can see, it kind of bounced along the bottom there for the last few decades. This shows a slide of just the Medford BLM timber sale program. The red bar actually shows what those forests in Medford, out of the Medford district, grow, which is roughly about over 250 million board feet a year. The yellow bar shows what the Northwest Forest Plan, which is what Bill Clinton came to Oregon to present and develop, what the Northwest Forest Plan would have harvested, which is about 57 million board feet. The blue bar is actually what the Medford BLM here sold, and the purple bar shows what cleared the hurdles of the appeal protest process, basically. So you can see the purple, the percentage of the actual growth is extreme in terms of the percentage of growth that we're putting on these forests each year. Like I say, the purple bar is what actually runs our mills. That's the material that we can actually bring to the mill and run the mill. That 2011, I believe, that lowest bar there was a result of suits brought by KS Wild and other environmental groups to stop our timber sales in the port systems. That's about 4 million feet, which would run our mill. It wouldn't even run our mill for a day. Or actually, it would run our mill for, I think, about 2 to 3 weeks, something like that. So that you can see that the amount of volume that clears the protest appeal process isn't enough to maintain our current infrastructure, is what it amounts to, which is basically us and Murphy Veneer, who purchase logs into the valley. This is the export logs that leave our shores for other countries from the western United States, and you can see the increase in 2010 and 11 primarily as a result of the China export. Those are primarily private logs that are exported, and so that's a source of supply that leaves us and isn't available to us in any normal way. And so our position right now is to try and increase the federal land harvesting to alleviate that issue. This is just an example of what the federal government has come up with to replace the funding of the counties for the timber that isn't harvested. It's called Title I Secure Rural Schools dollars, and you can see that in 2001 it was authorized at 237 million feet, or $1 million a year. It's dropped down to about $98 million in 2011. I think it's about $60 million expected in 2012. Those funds aren't available to the counties to fund our services for sheriff's departments and others, and maintain the prison populations. This is an example of the Rogue Siskiyou National Forest, what it grows annually, a billion board feet a year. Annual mortality is about 264 million feet a year, actually just trees that die. In 80 to 89, they sold 383 million feet. This last decade, 2000 to 2009, they only sold around 38 million feet a year, which is a very small fraction of the growth. It's about 5% of the actual annual growth is all. This is an example of what the forest grows. The yellow bar is what they actually average annually sell each year. You can see the substantial amount of standing inventory that adds every year to the forest fire hazard out there. So you can see there's a large problem with fire hazard, and our forests are developing an unhealthy state basically as a result of this lack of harvest. A lot of the harvesting that has been proposed in the last decade or so has been partial cutting. Those sales that are partial cutting and thinning projects are still protested by these groups, held up in court. About 60% of Oregon's forest lands are federal lands. They only produce about 12% of the volume that's harvested in Oregon each year. And basically what we need is some legislative solution that will fix the issues that I've just presented. The governor has established what he would like to find as an Oregon solution to this issue. He's developed a group led by Tom Tuckman that are trying to develop alternatives for the forest management issue that would serve the public and also the timber industry that currently exists at this time. So we're hopeful that they'll find some solutions to this crisis in terms of forest management. My point of view is that what they need to do is come up with a solution that will serve the forest well, that will serve our recreational industry and businesses well, that's compatible with what the public thinks the forests need to look like, as well as serve the species that they need to serve relative to the Endangered Species Act and other species management issues that they have to face. So, and I really do believe for Southern Oregon, based on a partial cutting regime, that we can find a solution somewhere in the middle that serves retail, the recreational industry, the businesses that desire to have good forests here in the area that will attract people and want to live in the area, that will attract the kids from the cities that want to come here to develop their education and actually grow into high-tech or whatever kind of job they want to take here in Southern Oregon. But right now there's huge opportunity and we need all to work towards that goal.
Thank you, Ken. And Wyse been working closely with the Southern Oregon Collaborative on their pilot projects. There was a project called Pilot Joe in the Applegate Valley that Jim's showing me his ears. He can't hear back there. Sorry about that. Just going to say Wyse was working with the collaborative on the Pilot Joe project in the Applegate Valley. They ended up purchasing that timber sale that did come out, and that's an effort that's trying to be replicated, trying to find solutions, ways of being collaborative and getting out timber sales. So Ed's going to cover that for a few minutes. I know we don't have a lot of time, so go ahead, Ed.
I'm going to stand up here. This is live still in? So my name's Ed Riley, recently retired from the Forest Service BLM, last 10 years with the BLM. Worked as a planner and putting together these projects and dealing with these appeals and protests, and right in the midst of it, and I'm kind of glad to be out of it. But I still dabble in forest. I own some forest land with my family. We harvest timber, and I still have a great understanding and concern about how we manage this forest. Another thing I want to say is the economic interests are really important, but as Oregonians, our identity is with these forests, and it's a really important part of who we are. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown of some policy, some ecology, economics, and some collaborative ideas here. The O&C lands, you've all heard about those, and the counties, Ken talked about that, established in 1937. It was a different world 75 years ago about how we viewed our forests. Ecology, ecosystems, that stuff wasn't really thought about then. The idea back then was that we would have this forest resource and we march through it in a regulated way, like a tree farm, on a 60 or 80-year rotation, and every 10 years we could go through there, cut the trees down, and have a sustained yield. And old forests were looked at not as a deficit, as a problem. They weren't producing, and people didn't value their contribution to the ecology and to species needs. Ken talked a little bit about the Northwest Forest Plan in 1994, trying to resolve some of these issues between conservation and production. Forest harvest levels in the greater Pacific Northwest dropped 80%. And this idea of ecosystem management, all these parts being managed, not just fiber production. And the Medford District BLM dropped by about half, and Ken showed pretty well the results of that. And this is the Northwest Forest Plan map, which shows what the intent there was: large set-asides for different types of activities. And so you see those green areas were focused on old growth, late sterile species, spotted owl needs, and the brown areas, there's a laser on this. Thanks. Here, down here, these brown areas are BLM, and the matrix area was considered where timber production, and it was a fairly industrial model of timber production that was expected. High levels of production, clear cutting could take place, and none of that really wound up taking place in the last 20 years. All the conservation efforts were engaged and fully implemented, but the production never materialized. This is a chart of the Medford District and the Northwest Forest Plan land allocations, and you see here that about 75% is dedicated to other values than timber production. And so this small 22% or so of timber production land is what we continue to argue about how we manage that. So realize that the land base has really shrunk down. And production versus conservation, all these values out here. And this is how we settle things in the courts. And this is not working. It stalls for years and years, and takes a lot of effort from the federal agencies to deal with these court cases versus high-quality project planning. So into the ecology aspects of it, I think most of you in Southern Oregon understand about fire. These forests were shaped by fire, maintained by fire. Different intensities of fire resulted in different stand conditions. You have surface fires, low ground fires crept around, kept the forest clean. You occasionally had stand replacement fires that regenerated the forest, renewed it, gave those early sterile species and habitats for those critters that like those. And you had mixed severity fires, which opened up small pockets and regenerated openings for pine species, etc. But the most profound ecological system that we have and process we have going on now is this lack of fire, where these stands just keep encroaching on each other and competitive stress. We have stands like this, ponderosa pine stands, where Douglas fir has come in as an understory species about half the age. The ponderosa pine can't regenerate because there's not enough sunlight in there, so we lose that plant community out there. We have large hardwoods that are extremely important for mast production, for acorns, for cavities, for wildlife, and they're being choked out by this Douglas fir with the lack of fire to open stands up and keep this competition reduced. We have stands like this, just a tangled mess, that if a fire gets in there, look at how quickly it's going to spread to that. And if you look at the vigor of these trees, they're very small crowns, and their ability to persist over time is limited. And they're going to wind up dying off, and we're just going to have this continued cycle of trees that can't differentiate and grow to be the big trees that society desires. Okay. That's not a clear cut, that's a natural opening. I want people to understand that our area is like that. I got to run through a few things real quick. Can I take another 1 or 2 minutes? Economics. These small trees, you can't just harvest these tiny little trees. You got to have trees between 10 to 20 inch to make this stuff work. 8-inch trees, 27,000 to make 1 million board feet. 20-inch trees, 2,700. Scale of economics. 1 million board feet runs the mill for 3 days. What the collaborative is trying to do is get a set of agreed upon guidelines that the federal agencies can use that will stem away these protests and appeals and get projects planned that are agreed upon early in there. And we're also trying to inform the BLM's new forest planning effort. We have a couple of, I'll skip over that. It addresses the recovery of the spotted owl, which is an enormous effort that's going on here. What we've done is look at contracting methods. These sales, these projects have to pay their way. We can't subsidize our way out of these things. We have generated a map of where economic viable timber sales can be done, where we need to subsidize, and where we can break even on these projects. And we have watershed-based planning efforts that integrate all this and predict where these volumes are. These are 2 shots of the Pilot Joe project. This is an opening here to regenerate ponderosa pine. This is something that people value. It's not a clear cut. They still think this is a good working forest, and this is generally agreed as a good solution. And this is what it looks like from a distance. This is one of these thinning projects. You still have a forest intact, and people are generally accepting of these type of forest values. Thanks for your indulgence.
Thank you, Ed. So the idea is to scale up that sort of project, and they're working on a project now, Pilot Thompson. I thought it was interesting, Dave, with a timber sale up in Butte Falls called the Fine Maple sale that you got involved in and sort of intervened. There was an appeal on it. It was an ecological forest sale, but it had a commercial unit involved, and there was an appeal on the other side, not the environmental side, but it was sold, I believe, to Rough and Ready. They liked the timber that was being sold. Dave intervened, and I think kind of helped get that through. So, but anyway, Dave, go ahead. You have a few minutes.
Okay. One of the things that Jeff asked us to address initially was how do we harvest more timber off the federal forests in Southern Oregon? In one word, we don't. It's not going to happen. The current state of affairs, at the very top, there is no will at the top, the president and the head of the agencies, to increase harvest levels in Southern Oregon. It's not going to happen. They decreased funding for the U.S. Forest Service by 10%. That's going to make a 25% reduction in their planned timber harvest for this coming year. The BLM's lost 39 people because they have more success moving timber up in the Willamette Valley. It's translating to even less and less timber down here. We're harvesting less than 3% of annual growth in the federal lands in Southern Oregon right now. Annual growth. We grow over 1 billion board feet a year. That's enough to make 85,000 homes. And we're not using any of it. What we are doing, we're causing, we've got a story of potential here. We have potential to either do some really good stuff, create jobs. For every 1 million board feet of lumber or timber that is harvested, we create between 8 and 9 jobs, direct jobs. We also create 8 or 9 indirect jobs, truckers, transportation, people that sell saws, the whole thing. The other potential is we have the potential to lose our forests. And they are so sick right now, they are so overgrown that we will have fires. We are the most fire-prone area in the state of Oregon. We have more lightning strikes down here per acre than anywhere in the state. We have the only dry side, west side of the Cascade ecosystem. We are akin to eastern Oregon because we have those dry conditions. The Biscuit Fire of 10 years ago was a disaster. It's going to be nothing compared to what's going to happen in the future. We squandered between 4 and 5 billion board feet of timber in that fire that was not salvaged. They originally planned to take 1.2 billion board feet out, scale it back down to 500 million, 300 million, they got 60 million feet out of it, just because of delaying tactics from the environmental groups. So after 4 years, it was virtually useless. We need a national policy to utilize our natural resources. We have lost the will in this country to use our natural resources, our federal natural resources. We could be energy self-sufficient. We could be timber self-sufficient. We don't have that direction. And somehow we've got to get it reestablished. We could be so successful in Southern Oregon, we could have 2 or 3 or 4 more sawmills if we just had used half of annual growth. These mills here would be set for life. It's not going to happen unless we have a change of national will. And that's basic. If you look around this room, everything in this room came out of the ground. Everything. Tables, chairs, glasses. The original place where it came from was the ground. Everything we use comes out of the ground, one way or the other. It's using our natural resources. If we don't use ours, we're using somebody else's. Chinese, Vietnamese, whatever. We're crazy. But we've got to start getting back to where we are a producer nation and not a consumer nation.
Thank you, Dave. So given that background, let's talk to Simon a little bit as far as whether the governor's idea of having an Oregon solution, kind of trying to put something forward, has got a chance, and we'll see. Simon, what's been your experience on that panel?
It's been nothing short of interesting. Good morning, everyone. My name is Simon Hare. I'm Josephine County Commissioner, and frankly, not given a whole lot of time probably keeps me out of trouble as far as saying something I shouldn't. This governor's task force has been sworn to secrecy. I'm sure they got some blood out of me someplace throughout the last 12 weeks to prove that. But serving with some really great people who are going to try to solve this problem. And so I have a whole page full of notes here that some of it I probably shouldn't say, but I think it's been framed really well. What I wanted to just kind of leave you with, and I think I'm given an opportunity to answer questions here at the end, so maybe that's the best opportunity to go into some of this. But there are trees on the carpet of the House floor in Salem. If you ever get a chance to go up there and you go into the House side of the Capitol building, I think that's very telling to say that when we don't have that basic resource management in order, our house isn't in order, no pun intended. But until we get that done, everything we're talking about as far as bringing engineers, having doctors, we have 1 in 900 doctors in Josephine County, a totally unacceptable ratio, 1 to 900 residents. And until we solve this basic resource management issue, I think we've kind of outlined some of the issues by the panelists here. I really appreciate them kind of framing the conversation, but we're not going to have an economic base to tax, to improve our schools, to handle the PERS and healthcare issues that we have in this state. So we've got to really start at the ground level, and I wanted to highlight that because that just makes it important to everybody in this room, whether or not you're a conservationist, an environmentalist, or somebody who's an advocate for timber harvest. I think there's a way to get to be an advocate for forest management, regardless of where you sit politically or ecologically on that spectrum. There's a lot of sound science out there that I think everybody's kind of waking up to that says the status quo, doing nothing, puts everybody at harm, and not just the timber industry. I think everybody who relies on this beautiful place to live, we rate very well as a livability area nationally. We rate very poorly as far as a place to do business, to retire to, for those health benefits and all those other aspects that everybody really holds valuable. And so we need to broaden that conversation. I want to encourage everybody to get involved in this. I think the state legislature has. We've got good progress on the federal House side. We need to put some pressure on the Senate side to say, I know it's going to be challenging to get some sort of a federal fix to this. I'm not as pessimistic. I've got the governor's garb on. I'm pulling up that optimism that he's come into the room with every single meeting. And we're going to get something done because things are going to get a lot worse if we don't fix it. And I'd rather nip it early. I say early, but we've had this problem for 25 years. Doug Roberts, who's a commissioner, finished up his 32nd year, has been working on this pretty much since he got elected. And so that's exactly what I stepped into the ring, got off the couch to do, and I'm committed to it. And I think everybody in this room ought to kind of feel that same way, that commitment to solving this issue, because it's real. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, I know we're out of time, so we're just
this is our last panel before we again have a discussion with policymakers, and hopefully we have a subject of interest to all of you. It's healthcare reform and health. And to set the stage for this, and again, if you have been alive over the last couple of years, you know there's been a lot going on in healthcare reform. My dream last night actually had this session taking place in January of 2015. And the nice thing about 2015 is that we'll know a lot more answers to questions relative to healthcare reform that quite honestly we can speculate about today, we can think about, we can talk about, but we quite honestly will not know how some of these reforms will actually be operational until 2015. As you know, we have federal overlays and we have state overlays, but the interesting thing about healthcare is that healthcare is delivered locally. And our panelists today, I think, will give you a unique perspective as to how we're looking at that relative to Jackson and Josephine County. So I'm thrilled to have Roy Vineyard, the CEO of the Asante system, and Ann Alftine, who is a physician who lives in our community but has been spending the last couple of years on a unique journey relative to the Jefferson Regional Health Alliance, and particularly over this last year, her involvement with these new entities called CCOs, Continuing Care Organizations, which is a new way that we'll be actually delivering health care in our valley. I think the one thing that we wanted to also just touch on was the fact that within the state of Oregon, there is a lot of activity going on right now. You've heard about it probably this week relative to our perspective on what's called the healthcare exchange. In Oregon, we're going to call that Cover Oregon. And basically, it's going to be a way for individuals and small employers to be able to access the health insurance industry and the different types of products. But I think it's important to remember that within the state of Oregon right now, that the state of Oregon purchases around 20 to 25% of all health care that's paid for in the state of Oregon. And so it's a huge player through our state employees, through our government employees, and particularly through the Medicaid population that is eligible to get health insurance and health insurance subsidies through the state of Oregon from federal resources and state resources. If you had a chance to look at the governor's proposed budget for this coming biennium, look at the Oregon Health Authority. $8 billion is what is being budgeted for the next biennium just in the Oregon Health Authority. So we're talking about a huge impact relative to what is purchased, how is it purchased. I had the privilege of chairing the Oregon Health Fund Board, and at that point in time, before we went into the recession, about 12 to 15% of all Oregonians had no access to health care insurance. Well, the recession ramped that up to between 15 and 20%. So we have a situation today where over 600,000 Oregonians don't have health care insurance. And the reality is we're embarking on a process where many of those folks, for the first time, will have access to health care insurance. How can that be? Well, that can be because of subsidies. And that means transfers, supports, depending on family income, to be able to access health care insurance. The exchange, in its simplest form, is something that we could probably do very easily through just the existing private industry base and using the internet, you know, working with our local insurance brokers and having access. The dilemma, the challenge, though, is how do you deal with, in essence, this huge population who requires and deserves different subsidies depending on family situations, economic situations, and how do you make this thing work operationally? Because again, you're talking about a tremendous amount of money. So the Oregon Health Exchange, Cover Oregon, we have had the advantage of tremendous input by both Oregon Health Authority and the insurance division relative to how to set this up. Rocky King, who is in charge of this right now, probably knows as much about it as anyone in the United States. And we're gearing ourselves up starting in October 1st of 2013 to be able to offer health insurance access through this whole new model. There are unbelievable questions that are being posed and need to be resolved as we move forward. And again, hopefully we know that the legislature will be there answering and adding input in on the health exchange as we move through this session. But at the end of the day, for the residents of the Rogue Valley, think of a time where insurance is truly portable. Think of a time where families can be able to plan on long-term health improvements based on the fact that they have access to a family physician, that they have access to the type of care that they need. So I am really, really excited about where we're going. One quick other overlay at the federal level, and then we're going to hear what does this mean in our own community, through our own health system, and through this Jefferson Regional Health Alliance, which again is, I think, one of our secret weapons that we always are so proud of in Southern Oregon, of being able to work together and understand and deal with some of the massive issues that we're talking about. This was in a newsletter that I received yesterday from former Senator David Dernberger in Minnesota. And in his newsletter, he focuses on healthcare reform. He reports, researchers report this week via Health Affairs that increases in U.S. healthcare costs of 3.9% in each of the last 3 years are the lowest in 52 years. It may be Obamacare at work, says Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius. It may be that patients can't afford services, say opponents. We need to raise our premiums, say some of our large national insurance plans, in some states by as much as 20%. What's really going on, most experts will say, is health reform. Changes in how it's delivered and how is it paid for. The kind of changes that most good health systems have known were the only answers to public pressure to contain the increases in public spending on health care that are driving a good share of our entitlement spending. So again, without further ado, I'd like to give both Roy and Ann a little opportunity to talk about what does it mean relative to the Rogue Valley as to how healthcare is going to be delivered here in the future and how is it going to get paid for. So Roy, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you, Bill. So as I look at this and try to put it into some context, for business, healthcare is about cost. And that cost 20, 30 years ago was relatively speaking a negligible part of your business expense. Most recently, it's one of the most serious inflated costs for business. For employees and for individuals, cost is also an issue, as well as access to health care. So there is a context around the need for reform. Right now, we spend nationally about $2.7 trillion per year on healthcare. That's about 17% of our gross domestic product. If that trend continued with our current rate of inflation, by 2020, we would be close to $5 trillion and over 20% of our GDP being spent in healthcare. Another contextual issue about why reform is needed, the number of, our population is aging, as we all are aware. Medicare, the number of Medicare recipients right now is about 43 million. By 2030, that number will be closer to 80 million people. Right now, we have 47 to 50 million people in the United States uninsured. As Bill mentioned, over 600,000 in the state of Oregon. The cost shift that business now is incurring is what has become unbearable. And the reason there is a cost shift, and for those of you who may not know what that refers to, is that Medicare, funded by the federal government, reimburses providers maybe as much as 80% of their actual cost of providing that service. Medicaid is probably closer to 70% of the actual cost. Well, you can't run a business in a deficit, and so that differential is made up by all of you, business, that are paying that cost of healthcare that isn't being covered through Medicare and Medicaid. So things that have been driving those healthcare costs in the past include fee-for-service medicine, that is being paid by the piece, by the service provided. That has incentivized everyone to increase volume of tests and procedures. There's been a lack of coordinated care between hospitals, between physician providers, between other providers of care, which leads to overtreatment. We have a huge administrative burden, a very complex system. The billing and verification process is extremely complex, which has led to increased costs of health care. I mentioned aging population. Chronic disease issues. Chronic disease actually encompasses about 84% of the expenditures of all healthcare dollars in the United States. And then finally, behavioral health issues and a lack of coverage for behavioral health issues. So how is the health reform, the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, going to be funded? The cost is estimated, or has been estimated, about $1.1 trillion over the next 10 years. About half of that is going to come from cuts from providers. For example, the hospital industry will be accepting $155 billion of cuts in Medicare payments over the next 10 years. The other half is going to be from new taxes and from new fees. Interestingly, we said the $1.1 trillion I mentioned is the cost of this. The Congressional Budget Office has already calculated that that is probably closer to $1.7 trillion in cost. And if you look, if history is any guide, the first year that Medicare came into being, the estimates were off by a factor of 50%. So we are probably looking at a higher cost for healthcare reform than what has been predicted. The goals of the Affordable Care Act or healthcare reform are two. It's delivery system integration and insurance system changes. So delivery system integration includes things like linking performance, that is outcomes, patient satisfaction, and cost, to the payment that you receive and the incentives that healthcare would receive. Increasing integration between physicians, hospitals, long-term care providers, and other providers of healthcare in the community. Increasing access for healthcare services for the underserved. The healthcare reform should provide healthcare coverage for an additional 32 million Americans, about 16 million through Medicaid, and about 16 million through the health insurance exchanges. Insurance system reform includes things such as eliminating pre-existing conditions and lifetime and annual limits for insurance plan coverage. Also requiring coverage of preventive health for patients with no co-payments for those patients. The creation of health insurance exchanges, as I mentioned, to help access and to manage subsidized purchases by individuals and by employers. So that's a really brief synopsis of healthcare reform. Some of the challenges in Southern Oregon and also opportunities, but mainly challenges in this context. For Southern Oregon, as opposed to the rest of the state, we have a payer mix that is a lot different from the rest of the state. I'll give you an example for hospitals. It's pretty similar, I believe, for physician providers. About 54% of our business is Medicare. About 15% is Medicaid. About 7% is self-pay, that is uninsured people. About 24% is commercially insured population. So think about the cost shift I mentioned earlier and the unreimbursed cost of care for Medicare and for Medicaid, and for self-pay it's even lower, anywhere between 0 and 10%. We are now shifting that cost to a smaller group of people in the commercially insured market. As I said, about 24%. That compares to Portland of about 35 to 40% commercially insured population. We have an aging population, as I mentioned, but even more so in Southern Oregon. About 20% of residents of Southern Oregon are 65 years of age or older. We're a retirement community, and we continue to grow faster than the rest of the state and the rest of the United States in terms of aging of our population. So some of the challenges, but also opportunities, would involve an integrated information system. That is actually having information systems that can be utilized real time by hospitals, by providers, to access information so that we're not duplicating services, so that care is better managed across the continuum. One of the challenges that is the cost. Asante, for example, is spending about $57 million implementing an integrated information system over the next 3 years. Another opportunity, but also challenge for us, will be actually implementing what's called evidence-based practices, care protocols, best practices for medical care. Those are sound like easy things to do, but to get agreement on what is actually best practice for a particular care or issue that a patient has, and to get those implemented widespread throughout a hospital system and a healthcare system is a very difficult but necessary challenge. Another thing that is happening that I believe is an opportunity is true physician integration with healthcare systems, hospitals, and other providers, and also a shift then away from inpatient care and more toward outpatient care, which is a less expensive part of care. And then finally, I believe one of the biggest challenges, but also opportunities for healthcare, will be a closer relationship with the payers, with the insurers, and actually the sharing of risk for outcomes and for the cost of healthcare. So I'm going to turn it over to Ann Alfteen, that we may tell you in a few minutes here some of the good things that are happening in Southern Oregon to address some of these issues.
Thank you, Roy. Let's see if we can So I've got some slides here. And I wanted to thank both Bill for inviting me and Roy. It's an honor to be up here with you at the top of you guys here. Maybe a little bit louder. Closer, is that better? Okay. I'm Ann Alfteen, and I came here in 1998. My husband and I, right out of residency at the University of Iowa, and came and started our practice in internal medicine at the Medford Clinic. It closed in 2000, a year and a half later, and we started the Medford Medical Clinic. I'm no longer practicing there. I'm now doing project management work for the Jefferson Regional Health Alliance. I share that story because I want to show that I have some sort of idea of what it takes to run a business, and it's really challenging, a challenging perspective. So one of the stories I want to tell before I get into the slides is I was in Portland yesterday talking to the CCO Oregon, which is the Coordinated Care Organizations. They took all the Coordinated Care Organizations, brought them all up to Portland, and we had some discussions about what was going on, and I talked about the Jefferson Regional Health Alliance. And I put up the slide about the Jefferson Regional Health Alliance, and I said, we're not from the county of Jefferson. That's actually a county north of Bend, and we are actually from the mythical state of Jefferson, and they just did not know what that was about. So I got to talk about how we tried to secede from the nation with Northern California right before World War II, but it didn't actually happen, clearly. So let's see here. So the Jefferson Regional Health Alliance formed in 2005, actually, and I have written up there 2004. That's when Peter Singh was actually invited to Southern Oregon to have a very broad-based community discussion about health. And I don't know, were some of you at that? Were you guys at that? Bill, you were at that? I'm not sure if anybody else was there. A couple of hands. Okay, that's good, because I wasn't there, so I can tell the story as the myth as it was been told to me. But what was interesting is that Peter Senge is a big thinking person, a lot of systems thinking. And after a day of conversation, they came up with this chart, which looks really simple to me. But it's really deceptively simple, which basically says we start as healthy. We might have an acute illness, and then we'll move into chronic illness, and believe it or not, we all die. And so that, and you can see there's arrows that you can be healthy and stay healthy. You can be healthy, go to an acute illness, and then go back to being healthy. And you can possibly even move from moving from the chronic illness back into the acute illness, or even into health again. But those are all within the system of health. And the thing that folks that helped to start the Jefferson Regional Health Alliance realized, and one person in particular is Kathy Bryan at the Gordon Elwin Foundation. She was offering small to medium-sized grants to people in Southern Oregon around healthcare issues, some in the health, some in the acute stages, and some in the chronic stages. And she realized, and that board realized, that the effect of that was not as good as it could be. We need to start bringing together people to have conversations at a system level. Who are the people that are dealing with a chronic illness? Who are the people that are dealing with health? And elevate this to a community discussion. And that's why the Jefferson Regional Health Alliance was formed. It's a diverse group of healthcare leaders and thinkers. Both Roy and Bill are on this board. And again, I think they saw also that there was ways we could work together to do things that we couldn't do individually to help improve health for Southern Oregon. So as Roy was saying, and before I get into the details of this slide, there are decreased dollars to deal with health and healthcare in the nation. And I'll get to some of those statistics in a little bit, but that gives you three options. You can stop covering people, you can stop paying for certain procedures to be done, or you can stop paying the providers. And that's really what you have to do. The governor and the legislatures basically said, no, we want a different option. We want you guys to do something more innovative than that. We want to triple aim. We want to improve care. We want to decrease costs and improve the patient experience. And we need to do this not by cutting people out of it, not by decreasing the amount of care people get, but we want to do this in innovative and collaborative and integrated ways because we know there's inefficiencies in the system. So, so the Jefferson Regional Health Alliance then can operate by convening different folks together around projects that help us to integrate healthcare. So we act as an incubator. Sometimes it's politically or financially really challenging for an individual organization to take on some of these projects themselves. And so when we have a community-based and more neutral group, such as the Health Alliance, it allows for projects to form. We also work as a networking support. We are based in both Jackson and Josephine counties, but we have people on these committees from Klamath and Curry County as well. JRHA is also a learning community. Again, it gives a place for a community and people to come together and say, all right, what worked, what didn't work, why is it working, why is it not working, why are we doing this? And then the JRHA funding is funded by its members, and that's about 10% of its funding. The members then are the seed funding, which allows us to get grants and sponsorships to do the different committees that we have. So the committee structure, so in 2005 when it started, we didn't have a committee structure. And in 2010, I got together and said, we want to look at these 4 areas. This is a critical time, and things need to happen. We need to get some work done. And so they decided that end-of-life care, health information exchange that Roy mentioned earlier, the integration of mental health and primary care, and healthcare reform are the key critical issues. And over those 2 years, as project coordinator, I got it was a wonderful opportunity to work with incredible resources in our valley to bring people together to work on end of life. For example, the COHO, which is choosing options, honoring options. It educates our community and our providers on what are the options for end of life care, so we can have the conversations that we need to do and tell our doctors what we want at the end of life. Turns out 70% of people want to die peacefully at home with their loved ones, and only 30% actually get to do that. And so we need to educate folks about how do we get that done? How do we get our needs met in that area? And that's what COHO does. And then the Jefferson Health Information Exchange was a NIDIS that came from Asante, and in purchasing very expensive technology, but the hope is that it will help to bring data to the physician to allow the best possible decision making, as well as information flow to allow the health information to move where the patient moves. It's also going to help us with integrating care between dental, physical, and mental health. And we are very excited. The Jefferson Regional Health Alliance, again, started 2 years ago with convening conversations around that. And just this month, we are implementing the first early adopter clinics. So it's an exciting time to be a part of that. The third part was mental health and primary care integration. And there's many different places where you could work on that. I mean, we've all read the papers. There's a lot of issues around mental health that need help. And I know our folks at Jackson County and Josephine County and their mental health teams are working hard to transform how mental health is happening. It's a challenging field. One of those specific pieces we're looking at is that, thank you, that the region, Oregon, the state of Oregon is #1 in deaths and use of opioid prescriptions. This is the Vicodin and the OxyContin. These things have street value and they're causing enormous havoc in our schools, in our workforce, and in our jail system and justice system. And so an opportunity, we realize that the physicians are actually becoming, not intentionally, drug dealers. And how do we set a community standard for prescribing opioids? So that was another initiative that we worked on. And finally, under healthcare reform, we did a lot of convening for helping people to come together to talk about how do we come together to form these coordinated care organizations to change how we integrate systems for the Medicaid population. We've also had conversations around workforce and education, and also at looking at the high utilization. There are some folks that use the emergency room in the hospitals way more. It doesn't serve them or any of the parts of the system. So that's what JRHA has done in the last couple of years. And here are some statistics about why this is important to you. So Americans make up 5% of the world's population and spend half of the world's medical dollars on the planet. And yet the life expectancy is near the bottom rankings for developed countries. So we're paying more for worse outcomes. And this slide shows us that the national healthcare expenditures per person from 1990 to 2018. And in 2008, we were at around $8,000 per person spending. And projections are that in 2018 will be upwards of, I can't read my number, 30-something, $13,000 per person. And what's interesting is that if you put that up against the per person, what their income is, it's $39,000. So that's just, we can't do that. I mean, so what is striking to me about this is this affects all of your employees and you as business people. And I know myself, I get insurance through the clinic that my husband runs, and it's terrible. And I'm a physician. It's not very tenable. Again, another slide showing if healthcare costs rose as much as medical inflation since the 1930s, my pound of coffee would cost $64. I would not be drinking coffee. It would be a sad day for Starbucks. So it's really easy to say, whose fault is it? And start pointing fingers. But we have to remember that this is a system issue and that we're all involved in this, and we can't point fingers. We actually need to come together and collaborate on it. So we are living in with finite resources in an infinite system. So this is a slide I show almost every time I meet with the Jefferson Regional Health Alliance, and they're kind of sick of seeing it, but it basically says why we need to come together, we need to do this collaboratively, and it sounds like many of you are already doing that. Some industries are better at this than others, and let's just say that healthcare is not known for doing this. And so reminding ourselves that we can be better together takes us looking at really seriously at turf issues and trust issues, and that's what this slide's about. Over time, we can develop more trust and integrate more effectively. And this is a reminder to say that together we can be the new architects and point a new direction for things. And here's our key components for what the last 2 years has been really helpful in supporting collaboration. Project lead experts, like Mark Hetz, the CIO at Asante, who really has this wonderful knowledge and skill set around health information exchange to help lead that. The stakeholder commitment development, bringing these folks to the table and helping them to talk to each other and build relationships. A torchbearer for just the idea that this should exist. Neutral leadership and holding space, I can't say enough about that one. There's been a number of times in a meeting where it's very clear that something needs to be said, and I'm able to say it because I'm a neutral party. I have no organization that I'm trying to promote one more than the other. A physician champion and optimism. And this isn't, oh, let's all just get around and be happy kind of optimism. This is about holding a vision that it can be done, and it has to be done, and that the finances have to work. So I want to thank you for your time, and this is JeffersonRegionalHealthLines.org if you're looking for more information and some of the emblems of the folks that are involved. Thanks so much.
If you have a question card that's not been picked up or turned in, if you'll just hold it up for a second, someone will swing by and grab it from you. But what we want to do is sort of come to the, okay, so what, now what part of this, and see where we get from here, and how do we move forward on the 4 initiatives that we were able to put into the program today. Obviously, all 50 of the issues that are on the Oregon Business Plan initiatives list are very critical, not only to Southern Oregon, but obviously to all of Oregon. In order to keep today's session in a manageable period of time and let you back to your regular full-time work responsibilities, we picked the 4 that we presented today, and I hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. So, with that, I get the opportunity to sort of pose the questions. So I'm going to start off with the question I think that probably generated out of our forest management panel, and this is actually, Commissioner, this one is specifically to you, or some environmental groups will never agree to
harvesting.
Harvesting, I apologize. Harvesting our trees off of public lands. How do you stop the appeals and the litigation process that can ultimately bring that harvest flow that was talked about?
Well, that's probably the 800-pound gorilla in the room when we're talking about these things at on the task force. This gang of 14 that I've been drafted to participate in. That's the certainty aspect, and it's part of the principles that White had outlined. I think he's got six or seven from the start, and there's a variety of different avenues to provide for that kind of certainty. One of those would be a land sale, so that you take federal lands and you put them in the private sector's hands. That's where we saw that graph where the majority of the timber comes from right now, and the reason for that is that it has to comply with the Oregon State Forest Practices Act, which is I wouldn't say that it doesn't have any environmental standards. There's ACS, which are aquatic standards, that provide for some riparian reserves, but that's just one opportunity to provide for that certainty aspect of not skirting the litigation, but kind of navigating through it, or what have you. The other one is the DeFazio-Schrader-Walden proposal, which was the trust idea, that you would kind of put a portion of those lands in management hands under a board of 7 trustees that were mandated to find some sort of harvest level that was previously agreed upon and set in legislation. So I think the premise for that is that the 1937 ONC Act that kind of dictates the management over this 2.8 million so acres of ONC land predates all of these other subsequent acts that are fairly more general. The ONC Act specifically says that these lands are dedicated to the long-term sustainable timber harvest and management, and to provide for an economy right here in our local communities. It might have been 75 years ago or even longer than that this kind of wheel got in motion with the act, but I think even then they recognized the challenge that rural communities would have if they were disconnected from the natural resources that are in our backyards. There's a couple other opportunities for certainty, but that's certainly just a couple of options. I think I said, I won't get in trouble for anything I just said. I didn't say where we're going. Those are options.
Did a very good job, Commissioner. Thank you very much. The next written question, again, I would remind you, if you have a question, if you just write it out, hold your hand up, someone will soon pick it up from you. This would be for our healthcare panel. So maybe Bill or Roy, if you can, still in the room, you can maybe stand up and respond to this one. Access to healthcare has 2 components. One, a financial and/or insurance, and the second is availability of healthcare providers. What is being done to train additional doctors and nurses, and is there any provision in the Healthcare Act to make this possible or to enhance the access and availability?
I think we're very fortunate in our community, both with the Providence Medical Group and now with Asante Physician Partners, along with our independent practitioners, that we have the right choices in place to be able to attract the healthcare professionals to our area. And what has changed fundamentally is the old model was you were independent, you came in, you're a physician, you generally practice maybe in a clinic or a partnership. We know that many of the folks that are coming out with the professions and the backgrounds that we need desperately in Jackson, Joseph County are coming here with huge debts that they've incurred in being able to get those skill sets. And I think the exciting thing from my perspective is that we have a competitive, dynamic system in our communities to be able to attract those physicians. And we're actually finding, at least this year, as we brought up Asante Physician Partners, that we're starting to be able to recruit in some fantastic professions, particularly some professions that we have been trying to recruit into our community for a decade. We're now, I think, have the right combination in place. So we feel very good about that. Clearly, we know that the healthcare profession is basically a profession that requires a lot of certifications and technology expertise. And so I think that historically, you will find the medical professionals in our community have a great working relationship with both Community College, Southern Oregon University, and particularly Oregon Institute of Technology, and being able to develop the types of skill sets we need for our community. But we, again, need to always pay attention to that because, again, those professionals are being recruited on a national and global basis. Roy, they hit it.
The only thing I would add is, can't speak for the physician level, but as part of one of the work groups we have for the Workforce Board, we have a healthcare sector work group. Great Anniversary from Asante is the chair of that. We have other folks in the room, Phil, Holstein, and Brent Cal from Valley Media Care. We have the range from long-term care to assisted care, and we're really focusing on everything kind of below that. It's nursing, on down, occupational therapists, CNAs. So we have a nursing workforce that's been convening around that to try and address those issues. We know that these are structural and challenging issues. I mean, they were that way before the recession. They're going to catch up again as we come out of the recession, as the baby boomers age. And there are limited capacities at RCC or OHSU's SOU facility for our region. And the other thing I would say about it is the other conversation, and Greg can talk to this as well as others. People are very cognizant the healthcare industry is changing, so the positions and the capacities are going to change. And we had just a conversation around the need for community healthcare workers. And so we actually facilitated a conversation with community care organizations and started, RCC turned right around, hooking us up, some of us with the Stacy and the Power Up Academy, to really turn that around right away. We've had that training within, we're the first in the state to have it actually. The state's looking to us for models. So those are ways we're trying to be responsible for healthcare.
Thanks, Jim, very much. Any other questions that then I'm going to, Representative Buckley and Representative Richardson, the opening initiatives presented by Duncan and others this morning were reform PERS, if I can get this correct, invest wisely in education, and build a bridge. That's probably both the bridge to Vancouver, but it's also the bridge to some of the solutions. Would each of you like to comment on those three specifically, or any of the other initiatives that you heard about today in the presentation?
Since I'm older than Dennis, I'll go first. I give a lot of credit to the Oregon Business Plan, the efforts that have been made. We are moving in the right direction in many ways. The recession, I would not wish this recession on our state or our country. It's been so painful. But what it has given us is a sense of urgency to make changes and make transformational changes, and has been discussed today in healthcare, in education, and in public safety, which hasn't been talked about much today. We also have to make a transformational change in how we handle public safety, move it back into the community, have more community-oriented programs. It has to be done. In terms of the major initiatives brought forth by the business plan this year, I believe they're the right ones, and I believe we'll be working for them. I would ask us to look at not only transforming or fixing PERS, but to do it in the way that the governor's framed it, to with respect to public employees. My frame for this is my next door neighbor, who was a high school teacher for over 30 years in Jackson County. And when I spoke to him about this, he's a Tier 1 retiree, and I asked him, I said, what do you think of the governor's proposal? And he said, I'm open to it. I'm definitely open to it. He has a decent retirement. He gets to go see his grandkids. He gets to travel. He has one grandkid in Georgia. He gets to travel to Georgia to see his grandkid. He gets to have a decent, comfortable retirement, decent health care. And he's willing to adjust his COLA on that to help contribute. He wants it to mean something, though. He wants his grandkids in Oregon to have more teachers in their schools instead of laying off more teachers in their schools. He wants it to mean that we actually are going to be moving forward together as a state. So I think there's definite room on the PERS reform, but I think it requires all of us to step up a little bit further and say, it's not just my next door neighbor who has to give a little bit more. I think we all have to give a little bit more as citizens and transform the way that we look at citizenship. Investing more Wyse in education, absolutely. We're passionate about it, it's bipartisan. There's no question about that. But I would again bring it back to, I think one of the things we're not talking about, we laid off 7,000 teachers in Oregon the last 3 years, 7,000. We have to start rebuilding our personnel. Duncan and I are both passionate about proficiency-based education, and we're asking our schools to make that transformation to get out of seat time, get towards proficiency-based and outcome-based education. But we have to make sure they have stable resources to do that and have the personnel to do that. I would like to see our state hire 2,000 more teachers in the next 2 years as we invest more wisely in education. And building a bridge, yes, not only metaphorically building a bridge, all the work in education. I thought our education panel did a great job of talking about that. But building an actual bridge, the Columbia River crossing, I think it actually has to get done. And I think we have to do it in a way that is affordable, that's fair, but also make sure that we do have the resources for transportation projects throughout the rest of the state as well.
This discussion today has been extremely valuable in pointing out the problems that we're facing and the consequences of failing to act. We have not addressed the difficulty in actually implementing the changes that we all know need to be done. Since 2005, the budgets for social services and healthcare for state has gone up 44%. The K-12 budgets from general fund have gone up 7.5%. Bill mentioned that Oregon Health Authority is looking at an $8 billion budget in the next session, next 2 years. That is a 20% increase in the budget for the current biennium. Education is set to go up 7.5%. In 2014, next year, the current plan is to add 225,000 of the 600,000 uninsured, add 250,000 to the current Oregon Health Plan. The cost on that is about $1.5 billion, but the federal government says, oh, don't worry, we will pay that until 2016. In other words, it's a drug of choice that's hooked for 2 years, and then the state will have to assume that. We don't get there from here, you see? The cost of PERS in the next 2 years is going to be $4 billion. That includes about $330 million of just the cost of the service, the debt, on the pension obligation bonds that we've borrowed so far. It also, the $16 billion of unfunded actuarial liability assumes that starting immediately we will have an 8% return on the $56 billion PERS fund in an annual yield, compounded. Well, that's not happening. And so the $16 billion unfunded actuarial liability is actually much higher than that because the assumptions give you a false figure, because we're not getting 8% return compounded annually on our PERS, the PERS fund. The list goes on, and so what you have is talk about transforming medicine and healthcare, but it's not going to lower the cost. The goal is to lower the amount of increase. And when we're trying to get from 6% annual increase to 4%, that is the federal match portion. But even whatever we do, there's a state match that keeps going up. And so the cost for medical care and for health care continues on a trajectory which will keep down the amount of money that could be allocated to provide a better education. The PERS reforms, the governor has proposed in his budget, to balance his budget, $865 million of the balance, the revenue is going to come from savings from PERS. The public sector unions may not be real happy about an $810 million reduction from the COLAs that are currently being paid and will be expected to be paid in the future. And so to balance your budget based on $865 million of money that is subject to challenge by the courts, and when you have a Democrat-controlled House, Senate, and governor's office whose #1 supporter is the public sector unions, that may be a kind of a hard carry to pass meaningful reform. And so we do need to fix PERS and not just tinker with it. And we do need to transform education, but actually doing those things in the current political atmosphere in this state, to say it's going to be very difficult is an understatement.
Are there any other? Let's stop the card thing, because I think it's more important that we get some questions. So, if there's somebody out there who has a question and would like to stand up and
we've talked about the bridges a bit, and just a bit, but I was wondering, Commissioner Lohman, talk about the importance of the CRC to Southern Oregon, because Duncan and Jay and Jeremy are here to talk about what's important to Southern Oregon. And I think there are many who really don't understand and may say, well, gee, this is Portland, it's Vancouver, it's Willamette Valley, why should we care? I know the Medford Chamber is one of the first ones to come on board supporting the CRC. So, Duncan, Dave, would you talk about that? Why is it important to us down here in Southern Oregon?
I just want to note that Commissioner Skundrick is using a very good technique to avoid answering questions himself.
Well, I called you out that time, Commissioner.
I'll use another technique not to avoid answering the question, but I'd like to just quote Mike Card with Combined Transport, who runs a very significant company down here that carries goods nationwide. And I've heard him say that the single most important thing that Oregon can do for the transportation system is fix the bridge across the Columbia River. Because he's got truckers that, because of delays in the Portland area, have to take their required rest breaks instead of being able to keep going. And it changes his whole structure and the way he's got to manage his company, and it slows down getting goods to market. Getting goods to market is, as you heard this morning from J&P, that's getting goods to market in a timely fashion is critical to economic success. We've got a lot of companies here in this valley for whom getting goods to market over that Columbia River is a critical part of their success. So it's very important to the Portland area, but it's very important to the whole state as well.
Thank you very much. Any other questions you'd like to pose? Who else would you like to put on the spot? That's right. Any other questions for our group up here? Come on, there must be something that you heard that you'd like to question them on some more.
Why don't you let the panelists just reflect on
Yeah, okay, all right. So I'm going to start with, so I'm going to go back to Duncan. Duncan, I think, this is the first of these sort of, after the summit, what do you do to bring this home to communities within the state of Oregon? What could we be doing next to help support all of the initiatives and the general business plan as presented?
Well, first, let me thank you, and just coming down here, I always get excited, and just if you were an investment opportunity, I would be plowing a lot of money into you right now. I mean, this was an amazing morning, and it just always, I come away realizing what a remarkable opportunity Southern Oregon has. I mean, despite all the forestry issues you've dealt with over the last 20 years, the economy's done, you've diversified. I think forestry could come back with intelligent management of the federal force. I really do. I think I'm more hopeful about that opportunity than I have been in many, many years, thanks to a lot of the collaboration we're seeing down here. So I think the potential for the economy to grow is really significant. And then the collaboratives, both the healthcare and the education, those were extraordinary panels. And frankly, you've got they were the co-chairs of the most important committee. It's a little different now, but they still continue to be the leaders, and they are the most respected members of the House. And the funding streams that they provide for the communities in both education and healthcare are really, really important. And these guys are redesigning the way the state invests in both healthcare and education and public safety. And all of that, I think, given the kind of collaboration you have here, creates extraordinary potential for improving the education system, improving the healthcare system, transforming them, I guess is a better word, to get better delivery, which will really affect the economy. So what can you do? I would say keep doing what you're doing locally. Make sure these folks and others in your delegation are hearing it. But I think even more importantly, I mean, the Education Collaborative is a model, I think, for the state. I think the healthcare is a model for the state. I think in forestry, that work is really, really important. And then on transportation, Dave, and sitting as one of 5 members of the Transportation Commission, has a really great perspective. And as he said, you're part of a larger transportation infrastructure. We need to communicate that really widely and make sure we're getting the transportation infrastructure we need. And as you grow in transportation, I think that is a self-fulfilling system in terms of the air service and rail service. As you grow your economy, you get more volume, and that creates more opportunity for access to other places. So again, I would invest in Southern Oregon if I could as a stock. It's a great place, and I wish you your model for the state.
We may have an opportunity for you to do that.
Thanks.
So Commissioner, you've asked the question. Can you reflect on what we covered this morning?
Well, one thing, Steven's down here runs the Angel Network in our area, Duncan, so you can see him from a little date. And again, thank you for coming down, bringing your team down. I was at that first one 10 years ago at Harry and David, and we talked about the issues. I remember the hot topic at that time was substance abuse and finding employees. But thank you for being down here. And again, thank you. And also, for your comments about collaboration in Southern Oregon, we have reinvented ourselves somewhat down here. We've had to struggle with natural resources. It's still very important. It's not the final panacea to our economic woes in Southern Oregon, but it's certainly a major part of getting. So as our lobbyists and such work on that, we realize it's a national issue, but it's absolutely imperative that we have the governor's support. And I appreciate him meeting with Senator Wyden and trying to work together, and appreciate him forming the Gang of 14 and such, looking at this to try to get something done. But with that said, we want folks in the north to know that things really are happening here in Southern Oregon. We have an incredible micro, if you will, industry and manufacturing. We have some tremendous technical and technology companies here that kind of fly under the radar. There are things being done in Southern Oregon outside of the timber issue. And so we want people to understand that. We want opportunities, so taking a look at regulatory issues, taxing is an issue too, but it's not the biggest issue, but it's a big issue. But regulations is huge. And to take a look, and so Oregon people recognize, and Jay here probably can speak that much better than I can, that this is a good place to do business here in Southern Oregon. It's not just a catchphrase, we're open for business, but we really want to grow business here in Southern Oregon. And then we think we have a lot to offer here. We wish we got a little more, I don't want to say notoriety, because that's not necessarily always the best part, but acknowledgement. And but I think we get that with people like Bill, who's represented, and Dave, and such statewide, of course, these 2 representatives. So with that, I just want to say that for the folks that are here, the economy, you're all part of that economic recovery. So everything that you do, I salute you. For you employers out there in the audience, thank you for running a business and having to sign a check every day, or every week, or every month, or if you do it, thank you very much. And we're working in the public sector. I think I won't put words in Commissioner Hare's mouth, but we're working to try to make it, to do everything we can from the public sector to help you prosper. Because if you prosper, you're going to hire people. Those people are going to draw wages, and they're going to buy goods and services in this area. So thank you very much for that.
Commissioner Hare, you didn't get to ask the audience a question. Maybe this is an opportunity for that.
Well, I was in the back of the room for most of the presentation, trying to multitask, hear what people were saying, because I think it was really important. We have a series of good presentations that happened this morning, and people taking a little bit of time out of their, I don't know that we talk enough about this, but I think we're doing a good job here in Southern Oregon of bringing these issues to light. We have to continue to do that. I think I had a campaign slogan just a couple of years ago that if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And Josephine County and Southern Oregon, Jackson County working collaboratively together, I think Commissioner Skundrich highlighted that. We want to be at the table. We are at the table. And so I think we're going to push, we're going to lean hard into these challenges into the future and be part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem. One of those is that just want to thank the governor for appointing this task force. I don't know about appointing me, but having a task force in general, and also this pilot project within Executive Order 1207 to take a look at some of the land use planning rules that we have going on in the state of Oregon and what doesn't work for some of these rural economies. And it's very early in the stages. Jackson County, Douglas County, and Josephine County are working on that, and I think it's going to be a big deal for maybe setting a precedent within the rest of the state about how we can intelligently manage the growth of our areas and not be an impediment to the economic development when it needs to happen in particular areas where it wants to happen. Appreciate Skundrich for working on that infrastructure investment board and what he does on that. I think we're all one big team here. If we're pulling in the same direction, I think we have a much better chance of not only surviving but thriving in these challenging times. We're going to come out of it stronger and more resilient for the future. But always going back to that natural resource aspect of being a real foundation. We've got to get that taken care of. And I may be young, but I'm not ignorant to the idea that people have been working on this for 25 years. The time is now. We've got to get our head around it and get some state and federal help to move the ball over the goal line. So thank you to everybody who came already and Regional Solutions for hosting us.
Well, before we give a round of applause to our elected officials, Duncan, I want to call your attention to the last item that's on the agenda here, because you wanted to invest in our community, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to learn more about it. SORI is hosting its 10th annual Southern Oregon Business Conference on January the 24th. And you're going to get a chance to hear from four business representatives, not talking about their businesses, but talking about the sector that they represent. Internet commerce, you've heard some of that this morning on the transportation issue. Craig Johnson, the CEO of Harry David, is going to speak on that topic. One of Tolga's contemporaries, and especially high-tech electronics, Jim Hendershot from Radio Design Group, is going to talk on that industry. We also have Mark Rudolph from Amy's Kitchen, one of our large specialty food manufacturers. And we also have John Murphy Sr. Representing the wood products. They're going to talk about the sector and how the growth is there. And then the last item, we've invited back a site consultant who visited us last September, Russ Mueller, and he's going to come and give a larger audience a perspective on what he saw, what he learned, and how he thinks we can be more effective in representing ourselves as that very special region that you. So I got one of those little cube things to put on my phone. I can take your credit card registration right here this morning, and we'll have you lined up. So that's a place that you can invest in Southern Oregon. So please join me in thanking our officials.